Tension on deck.
Hey, good evening, Ron. What's going on, man? What's up with all this heat, man? 100 degrees tomorrow. That's not good.
Thank God the AC is working. Did I just jinx it?
Oh, man, don't say that.
I know it. No, it's really, we got a little heat wave going here in New York City, and you're down. You're up. Sorry,
I'm up here,
north.
yeah.
You're up north right now. So yeah, and I got a crazy busy week this week. I'll get into it a little bit later with everything that's going on. But I think before we start the show, we'll talk about last night. Yourself, myself, Maul and Bethel, Chief Mike Marino were invited, as well as John and Eric. Eric, as we know, is recuperating from surgery. John had a prior family engagement that he couldn't get out of, but we were invited to join the finale episode of the 10-4 Tavern. And so after 52 weeks, last week was the 53rd week, Tommy Joyce and Pete Fuselli had their final episode. They got a lot going on in their personal life, a lot going on in their business, personal business endeavors afterwards, after their retirement, and it just became too much. People don't realize how much it takes to actually do these shows and self-produce the shows, coordinate with guests. Like we have a great guest that we're going to be talking to tonight, Ernie Morales. We both know from On the Job. I worked with Ernie actually at his last command in the NYPD. He retired as my executive officer in Housing Borough, Bronx, Queens. So I had the pleasure of working with him personally. I know you guys, crossed paths as well. Fellow Bronx guy. So we're going to get into his career. He's got a great career. 22 years in the military, 30 years in the NYPD. Took a job up in Mount Vernon after he left, and then went on to Minneapolis, Minnesota. And also big into boxing and the running and motivational speaking and everything. So it's going to be a great conversation with Ernie. We're going to bring him up in a minute, but just wanted to take a moment in the beginning to say thank you very much to Tommy and Pete for their contribution to the Finest Unfiltered Network with their show, the 10-4 Tavern. We'll still be seeing some shorts cut out of their previous shows in the network. They're family to us. They didn't leave for another show or another network or anything like that. So it was a pleasure to work with them, get to know them, and we had a blast last night. It was like a round table, talking about old guests and just actually shooting the shit and having a really good time.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to thank Pete and Tommy. I don't think I ever missed one of their shows. I may have been late to a couple, but I always caught the shows. I think they did a phenomenal job, and they brought on a lot of really great guests. Like you said, like we have a really great guest tonight. So, but yeah, they really did a phenomenal job. I'm kind of pissed at them though.
I know where you're going.
Well, no, I was gonna say, well, all you guys got up and left and signed out. I got stuck with the tab last night. I don't know if it was planned like that or what, but
at least I still haven't got my 10-4 Tavern hat. Tommy was a little annoyed about that because he sent them out. The postmaster in Virginia, where he is, promised that we'd get them by Tuesday. You got your hat upstate. Even the Rockaways, the mail sucks. And I checked my mail literally just before I came upstairs to log on, and still don't have my 10-4 Tavern hat because I promised I'd wear it tonight. So I'll wear that hat the first show following. So probably next week when I get it. But they got some hats made up and they sent them out to everybody in the network. You had your hat. You were the only one. I don't know. Marlon was wearing his Yankees hat. And Pete's not a hat guy.
No, I'm not really either, but I wore it for a special occasion. So yeah. I wish them all the best though. So absolutely. I think they'll be back. They'll be back.
You keep saying it. You keep saying it's just closed for renovations.
That's all it is. It's closed for renovations. So
yeah, I mean, listen. it's a lot. It's a lot going on, and Pete has just took on a new job, so it's a lot more demanding. They both travel a lot. You've seen them, on their shows from various hotels and everything else. So it's difficult. They've missed business meetings because they're committed to the show. And again, it's tough to do, but we appreciate everything that they've done, what they brought to the network to help us get past that 275,000 subscriber, for the network. So again, Tommy, Pete, thanks for the memories. We came on as colleagues, if you would, with having different shows on the network, became friends, and we're leaving as family. So
Definitely.
yeah. So we appreciate that, and we appreciate everybody in the chat. There's a whole bunch of people here already. Let me get through that because we don't do a lot of all the chats don't come up during interviews. So we'll just throw a few up. Phil the Heater guy, he said he was going to be here tonight, and he's here. Thank you for being here, Phil. Mayor Jack, welcome. Mike Freed, as always, thank you. And then Terry, always supportive. Thank you very much.
Terry.
And Mike, we'll get into that in a little bit. Thank you very much. Terry, Phil, QC Beast is here. 10-4 Tavern, that was a great name, and hopefully it does. Mike saying they sent it to Brockway Parkway in Canarsie.
That's it.
I don't know. Last night, if he mailed it like he was last night, because the bouncer had to stick around. But yeah, so 2 Up and Down. That's a new handle. But yeah, it was a great show, and they'll be back hopefully, like you said. But like we said, they brought a different aspect to the network. You have John, Eric, and now Marlon that bring that boots on the ground perspective of the job, speaking up for those who can't speak for themselves, talking about everything that's talked about in the locker rooms and whatnot, and being able to have that voice for those that don't have the ability to speak freely because they're still active on the job. We talk from the executive perspective and all of our decades as executives. And look at this. I just got a notification a package has been delivered.
There you go.
I wonder if that's it. You know what? I may run down and see in a second, but and then they brought their squad angle and Pete his federal angle, and they had some phenomenal guests. And like we talked about even last night, they didn't do interviews like they thought they were going to do. It was basically just conversations like, hey, they're at the tavern, they're sitting around, lifting a glass and bullshitting. And so I thought it was great. So we're going to miss them. Their shows are still in the Finest Unfiltered catalog. So go back and watch the shows. And that being said, any final words on that, Rob, before we bring up our guest for the evening?
No, I mean, just wish them luck. And I'm sure they'll be back. So right now it's a 10-6 tavern. It's on standby.
They're standing by.
They'll be coming back soon.
Yep, they're standing by. But yeah, so we're going to bring up to the stage now and welcome to the executive perspective, Ernest Morales III. Ernie, how are you? And welcome to the show.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show this afternoon. I'm really elated and excited to be with both of you and share my perspectives.
Yeah, that's good. If you could turn your volume up a little bit or maybe get a little bit closer. You're just a little low.
How's this? Is this better?
That's a little bit better.
Yep, okay.
Better. So yeah, so like we said in the opening, we've all crossed paths through our career in the NYPD. Thought it would be good to bring you on and hear your perspective. And you got your hands involved in a lot of different things, very active. You're still remaining active in your retirement. So we'll get into that later on. But let's start with, hey, where did Ernie Morales grow up? And what brought you to a law enforcement career? and I'm going to text downstairs, check that package.
So, you know, we all have our own story to tell. And my story is no different than anyone else's. It's just from my perspective. And I grew up in the Lower East Side. I had very humble beginnings. I wasn't lucky. So I consider myself very lucky today when I think about where I began and where I am now, in light of everything that's happened. And we'll get into that. But I grew up on the Lower East Side and in a single family home to a mother who unfortunately was addicted to drugs. She brought different men around, and those men beat her up. They beat me up as well. So those were my beginnings. I was lucky because they had programs like the New York City Boys Club. And at 6 years old, I was able to get into the Boys Club. And around 9 years old, I found a role model in the boxing program. His name was Johnny Rivera. And Johnny Rivera took me in and he showed me how to box. Now,
the Boys Club though, did you join on your own or did somebody suggest it for you to go?
So it was right around the corner from where I lived, and that's where my mother had registered me. I believe it was like 75 cents at the time.
Right. Wow.
So for 75 cents, you were a member for the year, and it was great because they had programs, that after school programs, and they kept you there after school. And we know from our experience that juveniles tend to get in trouble from 4 to 7 p.m. So those hours I was in the Boys Club, kept me off the streets. And Johnny Rivera took me under his wing, taught me how to box. Now, ironically enough, I wanted to learn how to box because I wanted to defend my mom from those men that were beating up on us. Mm-hmm. The problem was that by the time I got big enough, strong enough, and fast enough, those men were gone and out of our lives. Either they were dead or moved on. And I had a lot of repressed angers and feelings. But I can tell you that during those encounters, police were called to our home. And it was in those encounters where I remember that they were always professional, they were empathetic, and I decided that that's something I wanted to do. I wanted to serve my community in the way that those officers served their community for me. They served as positive role models.
Did you ever have any negative interactions with the police when you were younger?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I was a teenager in the Lower East Side. So
right.
whether I was with family or I was with friends, sometimes I caught myself in the wrong neighborhood and the police rolled up and, you know, they throw everybody on the wall. They throw you down on the ground and you're part of a stop and frisk. Sure.
Right.
One thing I always remained is very respectful. Very respectful. I think today's environment and the challenges that police officers face today is because of social media. Adolescents are less respectful and they want to challenge authority, forgetting that there is a uniform, there's a human being behind that uniform.
Right.
Well, we can go down a rabbit hole with that one, Ernie, because there's so much more behind that too, because besides the social media aspect, you know, it's, you know, since 2018 to 2020 with bail reform and raise the age and all the other legislation that has come into play, the woke district attorneys that don't want to prosecute, they want to be legislators, not prosecutors, and pick and choose what crimes and what laws they're actually going to prosecute has become a big issue. And the fact that with social media, as you say, they see that there's no consequences, which just prolificates it, you know. But yeah, go tell us about. Let's stay with Ernie Morales. Let's stick with this. Is your day. This is your day, brother. This is a day to memorialize your career and your life of service and you know, and dedication to the public and to this country.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. From there, like I said, I was in the boxing program. I started out in local tournaments. I eventually competed in the Golden Gloves, which everybody knows, the New York City Golden Gloves, which was around for many, many, many decades. Great world champions came out of there. And I was part of that tradition. I was happy to be in that tournament, but I competed in other amateur tournaments throughout the regional area. And then I eventually turned professional. I had one professional fight. I was one and done. I won. You know, when I woke up the following day with my eyes closed, I said, if it hurts this much winning, I can only imagine what it would feel like losing. And I was lucky because the NYPD, I had taken the test. I wasn't the smartest kid back then. I'll tell you, at the time you could come on at 20 years old because I just paraphrased. I took the test at 20 years old. So when Mayor Dinkins was in, he froze the class. I eventually came on the job at 23 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I was fortunate enough to do that because this job is absolutely the greatest job, hands down, in the world, especially for me. It turned my life around 180 degrees, and I will never, ever say a bad thing about the job. We can debate this.
All right, then we can close the interview. We're gonna say goodbye now.
I was gonna say, maybe we could debate some individuals we've come across in our experience, but the job is great.
We agree, and that's one of the reasons that we do this podcast is to talk about a job that we love, a job that we came up through, how things have changed, and challenges that the officers have today. We talk about viral videos, we talk about incidences that happen, and we try to give our perspective as executives with over 40 years in the executive corps, and also try to give some advice on how the cops today could possibly navigate those landmines and come out better on the other side. But yeah, no, we agree with you 100%. The job isn't the job that we came up through today by far, but it's still, I think it's a great job. I agree with you. Not to cut you off, sorry.
No, that's great. I appreciate that perspective as well. I came on in October of 1990, so that was during the Dinkins administration. And we know that we were well over 3,000 homicides in the city back then. It was crazy. However, the criminals had respect. So they knew when they got caught, they listened. The gig was up. It was a different time then. And I don't think neither one of us want to be judged for how we policed back then and how policing is done today.
Mm-hmm.
However, I will say that, moving up the ranks was a pleasure. I had the luxury of doing SNU and anti-crime while I was a cop. Yes, this is where I graduated, Police Academy. That was April 9th, 1991. And that was a great day. That was the beginning of the turnaround for my life. My wife and oldest daughter there, Ayla. Yeah, my wife still looks like that, believe it or not. Still has the same hair. So, I started out in Spanish Harlem in the 2-5 precinct, which is pretty wild and chaotic back then. Like I said, I was fortunate enough. We had CPOP back then, right? Community Policing Officer. And we were from FTU, which was a short period. Wow, I felt like maybe it was 6 weeks. I went right into CPOP. From CPOP, I went into SNU with like 9 months on the job after the academy. Bounced off into anti-crime. I had a great special operations lieutenant who eventually retired as a chief, Kevin Clark. He went on to become the police commissioner in Baltimore, Maryland.
Yep.
So he was a great mentor. He always helped me lead me in the right direction. I went about 3.5 years on the job. I was transferred to Manhattan Narcotics back then. And that was up in the Armory up in Harlem, where I served as an undercover. I served as an undercover for over 3 years. Now, one thing I appreciated back then was if you looked in the database, it actually said that I was terminated for those 3.5 years.
Right, it does,
as an undercover, right? And that was helpful because there's one particular case where I remember I was making a buy and I was in an apartment and I came across someone I grew up with. And he absolutely knew I was a cop. And I had to make that conscious choice. If he gives me up, how am I going to get out of the situation, right? And I made the best choice for myself and my family. Fortunately, it didn't come to that. I was able to walk away from that situation, no harm, no foul. And everything worked itself out. There are plenty of undercover stories that I can go into. Wow, they were great. That was a great time. However, as you know, in OCCB, it's like the Roach Motel. You check in, you never check out. So the only way I can get out of OCCB was to study for the sergeant's exam.
Let me ask you though, when you went into as an undercover, did you volunteer or did somebody say, "Hey, Ernie, you would make a good undercover"? Like, how did you get into that position? That all of a sudden you got a pretty good spot there. So,
great question, because I was actually my uncle. I had an uncle who owned a tire shop in Suffolk Avenue down Suffolk Street in Lower East Side, and he would come across police officers. He had come across an inspector. I forget, Inspector Batista. That was his name, back in the early 90s.
mm-hmm.
Now, as you know, back then, sergeants were gods. They ran the job.
Yeah.
So an inspector, I didn't know what an inspector was. I never saw a captain.
Right.
So this inspector had called the desk, the 2-5 desk. He wanted to speak to me. He actually had a lieutenant call me. And the lieutenant said he wanted me to come in, except he wanted me to interview as an investigator.
Mm-hmm.
I was called in. They coached me. They told me that I would be called down for an interview, and they would try to get me to. They would try to recruit me as an undercover, deny them, and take the investigative position. You know what? They called me in. I panicked. They said, "All we have for you is the undercover position." They brainwashed me, and I said, "I'll take it," because I wanted to get into OCCB.
Right. No, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then did you ever transfer from a UC to an investigator, or you always stayed as a UC?
No, I did. So I actually transferred. I rolled over. I flipped. That's what they called it. I flipped to an investigator when I had about 3.5 years. 6 months before I got promoted to sergeant. I wanted that investigative experience so that I could eventually come back as a supervisor, stating that I had undercover experience and investigating experience as well.
Right. Now, did you get your detective shield as an undercover then?
Yes.
Okay.
So when I originally went in, it was 27 months. The investigators then sued the city of New York, and it was reduced to 18 months. So everybody received their shields within 18 months. I believe I waited more than 18 months because the lawsuit was after. So I never benefited from anything on the job.
You know me both, brother. Yeah. Was that a private ceremony? Or did you have to go? That's private, right? The UC
that was a private ceremony. So yes, I remember doing that at 1PP. It was at 1PP, but those were private, closed ceremonies. So they had us on the stage like every other NYPD supervisory promotion, except it was a closed for families only, and the PC and everyone else.
Right. Gotcha. Cool. I think. Look, Ron's got his hat. He's all excited.
Yeah,
It came. Not just in time, but during the show. So, in honor of Tommy and Pete, I told them I'd wear it.
Great. Yeah. So from there, I got promoted to sergeant, and I'll tell you.
Wait, let me ask you though. So you're a UC. You're an investigator. What made you think that you wanted to be a supervisor? Was there anything just wanted to move ahead, or was it just? Did you have a couple bad bosses that said, "I want to be better than them"?
That's right. I had a couple of bad bosses. I won't remember. I won't name them, but I will tell you that I eventually outranked them.
Good.
I'm not about getting even, but these people needed to be put on notice. You don't take advantage of subordinates, because what goes around comes around very quickly, especially in the NYPD.
Yeah.
So that was my way out. However, I was transferred to the 4-4, and on my first day on the desk by myself, I'll never forget this. An undercover, unfortunately, off duty in a domestic incident, was stabbed to death.
Yeah, I know. Jamie Bendencourt.
Yes, Jamie Bendencourt.
I was the platoon commander.
Wow. Everybody from the 4-4, and I mean everybody, even the PAAs, they all ran out of the command.
I know.
Oh my God. That phone rang. That desk phone rang. It was the duty captain. And the duty captain, my first day on the desk, duty captain says, "What do you have, kid?" I go, "I don't have anything. I don't know what's going on. Everybody just left." I was lucky, because who was that duty captain? Kevin Clark.
Yeah, good man. Yep.
And
Yeah.
Kevin Clark said, okay, relax, write these facts down. The borough is going to call you when I hang up. You give them these facts.
Yeah.
And left there. And that's, you know, he always served as that role model and that positive supervisor who guided you the right way. You know, I've come across bosses who would yell at you on the phone and just call you an idiot, not give you any answers, not help you progress forward.
Yeah.
And I believe that that stifles a lot of individuals, especially when it comes to confidence.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, I've
Terrible.
always been about building up individuals. I want to build them up. Now we know from the executive perspective, there's some individuals that just don't get it. And you have to be hard on them and you have to put them in their place, right? But
Right.
I've always been the supervisor that if you work, you will never have an issue with me.
Right. Right.
If you don't work, rest assured, I'm coming after you.
Ah.
And that,
that's what.
that those in today's age, that, you know, unfortunately, the way that the system is, it's almost reverse engineered against that type of leadership and supervision, where when you do address those who aren't doing their job, who aren't effective at their job, who, you know, especially when you come into a new place, a new position, we'll get into it later, right? And, you know, you have that line. We talked about this last night. Oh, this is the way we do things here. Oh, that still sends, you know, makes the hair on my neck stand up thinking about that line. I used to hate that. And I used to say to people all the time, listen, just because you've gotten away with things because that's the way you've done them in the past doesn't mean it's the right way to do it. And it's not the way we're going to continue to do it. So the gravy train just pulled into the station, my friend, and it's time to get off. And you got to have to deal with it, because if you don't, then we're going to have issues. But if everybody is on board and does their job, and if everybody does their job, the job is so much easier. Another problem is everybody tries to do everybody else's job or thinks they're trying to do everybody else's job. But when you give clear direction and people have, you know, clear understanding of what the job is that needs to get done, the job gets done, and it gets done a lot easier. And that comes from good leadership, good supervision. And like you said, you know, having that interaction with your subordinates, you know, and you know, and I know that's how you worked, you know, because I worked with you.
No, absolutely. Yeah, it was a pleasure working with you. You know, if I had to end my career that way, not by choice, but I couldn't have gotten a better boss. Laid back with Leyson, you know, hey, you know, he said it what it was, and we split it up, right? He worked the day tours, I did the 412s. It worked.
Yeah, it was good.
You know, yeah, it absolutely worked. Absolutely worked.
And it was a pleasure because I knew that when I wasn't there, that business was getting taken care of.
No, thank you.
I didn't have to worry about the shop.
Right. So, you know, after Sergeant, like I said, that first day on the desk, wow, I knew that the the 4-4 was the Wild West City. And as a new boss, I had to get out of there. Kevin Clark was the CEO of the 4-7 at the time. He brought me over to the 4-7 several months later. I worked there. I was a condition sergeant as soon as I got there, working 2100 by 0600. And this was around the winter. And I'm not ashamed to say this. Maybe back then, maybe if I was on the job, I would be ashamed to say this. But, you know, I want to say 3 months into that assignment, boy, did I go into a depression because I never saw the sun. You know, I came in at 2130. I dealt with all the problem children. That was my assignment as a condition sergeant for him. He assigned all his people that he was having the problem with, and we would get one-on-ones. So I would take him out on midnight, and we say, go ahead, we're going to write a book tonight, and you're going to address the conditions that I point out. One-on-one intervention with these individuals. And after 3 months in the winter, not seeing the sun, coming home, going to sleep, man, I was having some dark feelings. And I approached him and I told him, I went into his office and I said, listen, I'm not having good thoughts. This isn't working for me. And to his credit, he turned me around, appointed me as the anti-crime sergeant within the next week. And wow, that was a whole condition sergeant. I started out as a condition sergeant before becoming the anti-crime sergeant.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was great, not only for me mentally and physically, but it was great for my family as well. Yeah, we had. Go ahead,
4-7. 4-7's a crazy command, though. That's huge, and it's got a lot of hot spots. And I mean, great cops. I mean, I did my NSU there when I, or FTU when I was one of the precincts. But man, that was always busy. And you had a great boss there because Kevin Clark was a really phenomenal guy. So yeah, that's really interesting. And then what'd you do? So you did conditions, then you did anti-crime after that?
Yes.
Wow.
So we did anti-crime, busy command, like you said, especially around that Boston Street area.
Yep.
Even the Laconia projects right across the street, they would be shooting.
Right, yeah, Laconia projects, yep.
Right, they'd be shooting right across the street from the command, and they just run into the buildings. You couldn't believe it. You're like, how disrespectful is this? But that's how brazen they were. They felt that they can get into those buildings and they were safe, and for the most part, they were. Until we have the, we started
it's a depressing command though. Like when you walk in, it's dark, bro. It was like, I don't know, the lights weren't there. It was like dim. You walked in there, it was like, and I was like, almost I don't know if you ever seen the movie Joe and the Volcano, but down in the basement with the lights flickering and stuff. I don't know.
And then when you come in, you see Fontanez. He's, he was killed in the line of duty over in Boston, and that's what you see. So you're right. It's dark, dim, and then you see this, and you go, wow. Right. So now they have another memorial there because we had the other officer who was tragically killed off-duty employment last year.
Right. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, but the 4-7 was a great command. It taught me how to become a supervisor because personally, it took me about 2.5 years. I would say the hardest transition is from police officer or detective to becoming a supervisor. It's absolutely the hardest transition. It took me about, I would say, 2.5 years before I felt comfortable in my own skin. Yeah. And one thing I realized real quick was when I hit the rank of sergeant, it wasn't what I thought it would be. I said, wow, I have a lot of idiots in this rank as well. And they just have stripes. Right?
Yeah.
So, Brian Mulkeen. Yeah, unfortunately, that was my last job, and I was on the scene with Ron.
With me.
We dealt with that one. It was terrible. September night. Yeah, I'll never forget that. Yeah, even under the circumstances were terrible.
Yeah. The whole thing.
Yeah. So
Take Me Home. I can never listen to "Take Me Home, Country Road" again because that was the song that he was listening to in the car with his teammates while they were driving out. And they actually did a video, like a selfie video in the car of them singing the song. So that song, when I hear that song, it really tears at my heartstring on that. But yeah, that was a rough night for us, Ernie. Yeah. With Keon, which we'll get into Keon Ramsey a little later. He was the CO of PSA 8 at the time. So he took that really hard.
Yeah. I had the Bronx 10 miler scheduled later that day. Obviously, I didn't make it, and a bee stung me on the scene. So, yes, a bee stung me. So I'll never forget.
I remember that.
Yeah, right in the middle of the night. But yeah, the 4-7. You know what was elusive about the 4-7 is that you have many homes, private homes, in the command, and you believe you're coming into a nice, beautiful neighborhood, and then the sun goes down.
Yeah,
and it turns upside down.
Yeah.
Yes. So from there, ironically, I had taken the lieutenant's exam. I made the list, and one day I'm at the desk and the phone rings. It's the Internal Affairs Bureau, 315 Hudson Street, and they go, Ernest Morales, Sergeant Ernest Morales. I go, yes. They go, you're on Tuesday. You start in IAB. I go, how is this? I never put in for IAB. I'm the anti-crime sergeant in the 4-7 precinct, and I've never been happier in my career. I don't want to go anywhere. No, right? I think it was I forget who was the chief, but under the authority of the chief, you're coming down to IAB. This is your list number. So they got me off the list number on the exam. So I was drafted. That's drafted. Not that you go before the board and you interview for several units and IAB picks you. That's not a draft.
Because you're taking your chances. You know that that's coming.
Correct. That's not a draft. A draft is you're the happiest you ever been performing your job, and you get a phone call and they tell you you're reporting Tuesday, 315 Hudson Street. Welcome to IAB. You have no choice in the matter.
I had the same thing happen to me when I was on the sergeant's list for narcotics, because we had 3 years on the job when we were able to take the test, and we had to wait until 5 years. So there was just under 18 months after the list was promulgated, and they took 300 of us off of that sergeant's list and forced us into narcotics. So it wasn't the same, you know, but, you know, listen, the thing about that with IAB, with people that put in for units and then, you know, they don't have the phone call to keep them from getting scooped up, or if you get, like you say, shanghaied or, into the unit because of a promotional list, something like that, you know, needs of the department and everything else, is it does put people in the positions of IAB that will give the members a fair look when they're doing cases. Because we know the sergeants are like detectives in IAB. They're the ones that are doing the cases. That's the only positive about it.
Well,
It sucks for the guys that get their lives turned upside down, that are, you know, having a great time, doing what they're doing. You're doing anti-crime, you know, in the 4-7, you study your ass off, you pass the test, you do everything the job's asking you to do to better your career and your life. And then, you know, we're going to do this.
But the positive thing is you're on a promotion list. So, I mean, you know, there's light at the end of the tunnel, right? So, I mean, that's the only positive thing. But I think at that point, Ernie, they weren't getting any like applicants to IAB. So they were drafting everybody at that point, right? It was,
right.
So I think sergeants and lieutenants were getting thrown into IAB because they weren't getting anybody there, and they were trying to, you know, fill the gaps there. But I don't think it was fair. But, you know, I know a lot of people that got drafted, you know, as soon as they got their list number, and they did fairly well, and they knew they were going to get promoted maybe within a year or 2 years, they were sucked down there. Yeah, terrible.
And Chief Campisi was the chief back then, and he made a promise saying that I didn't have to go back to patrol. I can go right into OCCB, since that's where I wanted to go into. And I went to his office the day I got promoted to lieutenant. He said he's going to honor it. However, that's right. That's the day I got promoted to lieutenant. And
who's that sticking their head in?
That's Joe Blank, Crazy Joe. He was the
4-7 lieutenant, right?
That's right. Special Operations Lieutenant, Crazy Joe.
Yeah.
Vietnam veteran. Wow. That was a great boss. Boss.
Legendary, you know, right there.
Yeah, legendary. Great boss. You know, I got to give him credit. The first 6 months I was sergeant, I wanted to run out in the street and do my things. And Joe said, there's a lieutenant's exam coming up. Hit the office and you go study. So he let me study. He gave me my study time. And that's how, ironically, that was the best test I ever did on.
Yeah.
The lieutenant's exam. And that's because Crazy Joe said, sit down and study, kid. You got to move up the rank. Yeah. So that was good. Cool. That was a great time. Yeah. So from lieutenant, I went right back to the 4-4 precinct.
Oh, Kevin really? Clark, as lieutenant? Yeah. As
lieutenant, yeah. Kevin Clark.
But Resnick offered you OCCB as lieutenant then, or that was it?
So this is what the trick Campisi said. He will honor his word. However, he wanted a letter or a 49 from Resnick saying that it was okay. There was the red tape. Right. Yeah, there was the red tape. So I ended up going back. I went back to the 4-4, where Kevin Clark was now the CEO of the 4-4. And I had the second platoon. It was great because the players were still there. And now it was my job to restore order. Wild West City was not going to happen.
Yeah,
there were still some instances where it did happen. I remember we had Yonkers chase a perp in from a bank robbery up to the Cross Bronx Expressway. They got into a shooting. They killed them. Everyone ran again. I even had a police officer who passed away leave his crime scene, a great crime scene, and come to the scene. I go, what are you
Wow.
doing? I definitely gave him a command discipline for that, right? He's lucky he didn't get charges because he says, well, I needed to come here. I go, first of all, you didn't need to come here. This is another law enforcement agency. Secondly, what are you doing for the victim of that rape? You just poisoned the crime scene. If the DA's office ever got wind of this, the case is thrown out the window. You brought no justice to the victim.
Wow.
So this is why we have to hold our subordinates accountable, not because we want to be conceived or the notion of, hey, you're a jerk. No, I'm not a jerk. I'm a supervisor. And we have rules in place for the preservation of the job and for our victims that we serve, the people that we serve in the city of New York.
Yeah. Hey, did you know Chris Acker in the 4-4? Do you remember him?
Absolutely. Who doesn't know Chris Acker? Chris Acker is a 4-4 legend. Now retired. Yeah, now retired. Yeah.
He used to drive me, and he would always, because he did time in Secret Service, and he would always say the motorcade doesn't weave, and he would go right at people and with the RMP, and I'd be like, Chris, you're gonna kill somebody with that. And then another one of my close friends, Rob Wilson. I think Rob Wilson was the ICO there, right? Do you remember him? Was he?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, that's funny. But Chris was crazy, man.
Yes, he was. He was, but he was a fun and respectful police officer.
Oh yeah, a great cop, absolutely, all around. Yeah, definitely.
No, those were great times in the 4-4. Then it changed. We got a new commanding officer who eventually became the police commissioner. And the rules changed. The rules changed.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to eventually go to the FBI Academy, session 214. That was by far the best experience I ever had.
How do you not have pictures to send me for that? You didn't send me any pictures of that. Everybody that goes to they send me the yellow brick. They send me the picture in front of the sign. You're killing me, Ernie.
Rob, I'm going to tell you, it's like my boxing career. When I got every one of those trophies I got gloves from the Golden Gloves. Those mattered to me. I can't tell you where one of my trophies are, where one of my plaques. My wife has hidden them. I don't even know if I have them or she threw them away because I haven't seen a trophy or a medal in over 20 years. Pictures are like the same way. And we'll get into that because when I eventually moved to Minnesota, I moved out there myself. She came out for the first 3 weeks, and I'll get into that. But one thing I just want to mention is I wanted to take my plaques, everything I'd done throughout my career. And she said, no, we're going to leave that home. And I'll get into that when we get there.
My wife, you remember how my office was? I had the stuff up. I have a few things behind me. My wife used to call it the retirement bonfire. What are you going to do when you retire? That's your retirement bonfire. You ain't putting that shit up at home. And I still have a couple of boxes of stuff down in the basement, that I haven't put up. But when I started the podcast, I went through the boxes and I kind of took over this room, which I'm going to actually have to give up soon because my smallest daughter is having a birthday, and it's almost time for her to have her own room. So I'm going to have to find a new place to do the podcast soon.
Well, it's a nice setup. It looks great.
Thanks. So go ahead.
So after the FBI Academy, I was transferred to OCCB. So down in the Bronx, which was Narcotics Borough Bronx, actually located in Mount Vernon. For people right?
Yeah.
So, it's funny how that all worked out. Now, I was comfortable in the rank of lieutenant because I was always told, with overtime, we get the money of a captain. You could kick it down, you could kick it up. I was a lieutenant for a little over 9 years. Felt comfortable there as well. However, the same old cycle and issue came up again. You start working for bosses that go above you, and they're following someone's marching band orders, and they're kicking you in the ass all the time. Kicking you in the ass. So the only way I could get out was to study for the captain's exam. I studied for the captain's exam, and I actually made the list while I was away on military. I got, I won't say got drafted. I was already in the military. So how this came about was while I was on the job, I had actually enlisted in the United States Navy under the Advanced Pay Grade program. At the time, in April of 1999, I had a recruiter who I came across in the Bronx. And that's Fort, I forget the Bronx over there in the 4-5. There was a Naval Reserve base there. And I went to see a recruiter, Tony Balfour, who I'm still friends with today. That's ironic because you never hear good stories about recruiters at all. This recruiter, in 1997, we met. I provided him with my documentation. He stated on the fact that I was on the sergeant's list at the time, he could bring me in under the advanced paid program as an E5, which is a supervisor within the Navy. That was a petty officer, second class. He said I had to be patient. A year had gone by. I thought he forgot about me. One day I get a call at home and he goes, I have IS-3 if you're interested. That's Petty Officer 4, IS. I didn't know anything about the Navy, but I knew that was one rank less than E5, less money as well. I said, no, I'm going to pass. I'll wait. True to his word, he called me about 6 months after that and said, I have that E5 position ready. If you want it, you have to come in today. Not tomorrow, today, and sign the paperwork. I raced down there and I got into the 4-5. I signed that paperwork. Well, this is when I was commissioned. So at the same place, but 7.5 years, I reached the rank of E6, which is MA1. I was a military police officer when I was enlisted. Here, right after I got mobilized for the war, Operation Enduring Freedom, I received my commission 11 days after my activation. So they sent me home after I finished my training in Biloxi, Mississippi. They sent me to San Diego to demob from there. I was then sent back to receive my commission. And this was my commissioning day, which was, wow, real proud day. And, you know, the family was there to experience that. And I say that because all of these things that I've done throughout my career, thank God for my wife of 38 years. You know, she's always been the glue that held the family together because I was gone a lot, whether at work, NYPD, or other endeavors. So definitely credit to her holding us together as a family and keeping me above water.
Did you have to get permission from the job to join the military?
I did. So you had to write a 49 at the time stating that you wanted to go in, but Ray Kelly was a police commissioner. And we know he was a retired colonel.
Marine, yeah.
So he was really supportive of this. So it was an easy transition. I went in. The great thing about the advanced paid program was that they considered the police academy their boot camp. We were a paramilitary organization back then. So we knew how to properly salute. We knew who officers were. So they considered that proper training. I just had to go into a 2-week annual training to convert into the Navy. But it was easy. It was pleasant. And like I said, I was fortunate enough for 7.5 years. From day number one, my recruiter, Tony Balfour, who was an enlisted recruiter, stated, based on my resume, I should apply to become an officer right from the get, a commission. I said I wanted to go through the ranks because I wanted to feel what it felt like to be one of the worker bees, enlisted personnel before I became an officer, an executive, as you will, so that I could relate. And when I did make officer, as I moved up the ranks, retiring as a lieutenant commander, which is 04, that would be a major in all the other branches. I had the respect of the enlisted members because they knew I was enlisted just like them. So I had to experience this and I could relate to them.
All right, Ernie, you jumped on me, and I got to try and catch up with some photos. This photo I laugh at because this is the only photo I've ever seen of Ernie Morales without that Ernie Morales smile, that big grin on your face. All the other pictures I've ever seen and any interactions I've ever had, you got that big shit-eating grin that you have on right now. You know, always smiling. Except when you came to my office, you were like, we got to talk about something, if something bad was going on. But otherwise, everything, you always have that big one. So which picture is this while I get some more up?
So this was, I was actually a lieutenant, 03, and this was my board photo. So when you go up anything above 03 in the military, you go before a think tank. is like a deputy inspector, right? Except that your resume and your accolades go in front of a board. They sit in the bubble. That's what it's called. And all the offices, you have a speaker who represents your file. He dictates your file to them, your experiences, and they have, I believe it's about 5 seconds to click on the button in agreement. And if they click and you make above board, then you get promoted. I did not get selected the first 2 times. You get 3 looks. I got selected on my 3rd look for 04, which was great. I was happy. I wouldn't have been forced out because I had 18 years, and under US Code 10, that means they had to give me my pension. So I eventually retired with 22 years in the Navy. Now they say you can leave at 20, but every senior officer will tell you to give them extra, because when they add up the points for your retirement, you don't want to come in under, you want to come in over so that you're entitled to your retirement. So that's why I stayed 22 years. And I believe that it was just an easier transition because I retired in May 1st of 2021. And I was already the first deputy police commissioner in Mount Vernon at the time. So it was just the right thing to do. I had been notified that I was possibly going to be mobilized again. Yes, it was always meant to be. My wife put this together. I found this after my mother had passed away, and I was in the Navy suit, enlisted, E6. I actually reached that rank and wore that uniform to the left. And when I was in 01, an ensign in the United States Navy as an officer.
And
So
what
it was
we got
meant
here?
to be. Yeah, this is the World Trade Center.
Oh, sorry.
That was in World Trade Center. I was actually swearing in the Air Force enlisted, the airman in the blue uniform right there. He wanted me to swear him in and give him the oath. So we did it there in the World Trade Center.
Nice.
That's an honor.
Who's this clown?
Lieutenant Mike Silva. Hey, that was your SOL. Yeah. Right? Great guy, great
He's
lieutenant.
my guy, yeah.
Yeah, that's your guy. That's my guy, our guy. But yes, we went to the military dinner out in Russo's on the Bay, and this is the dinner, the Navy dinner uniform.
Nice. And then again, this was your last grade, right? Your last.
Yes. So that's Lieutenant Commander. That's what the 3 stripes, the little thin one in the middle means. 04. And that was the last photo. And I'm very proud of that photo because you know what I always say about the Navy, as big as they are as an organization all around the world, they get it right. And I wish the NYPD could get it right. And I'm not complaining about the NYPD. I'm just saying that they could follow the military order, my experience in the Navy, because we'll get on to my experience in the other 2 departments. And wow, okay. The NYPD, they call us New York's finest for a reason.
Mhm.
So yeah.
All right, so let's get back. Let's jump back to the NYPD. You make captain, right? You go to 3-4. Take us from there.
Yeah, I go 3-4 under Barry Bizzetti, great commanding officer. And like we did, Ron, he said, I always like, I like, when you're dealing with a gentleman, right? Where they go, hey, what tours would you like to do? Whatever you need me to do, sir. You'll be doing 412s. He gave me the same thing. Good. You'll be doing 412. All right. So Barry did the day tours. I did the 412s. It all worked out. The 3-4 had a heavy nightlife, especially all down Dykeman. It was a great 2.5 years as an executive officer there. And then, I remember 2.5 years at rank. We were doing mentoring for newly promoted captains and lieutenants who were going to get promoted to captain. And I served as a mentor under Bill Bratton's 2020 program. When command assignments came up, I was passed over. I was passed over twice. And I was like, what's going on here? I actually went downtown and I had a conversation with a chief who was the XO chief department back then. And I said, hey, what's going on? How am I getting passed over? I'm good enough to be a mentor for newly promoted captains, but I'm not good enough to get my own command. 2 of my mentees received commands before I did. what, and I'm going to be truthful about this. You know, I had 24 years on the job, so I really didn't care. If they told me to kick rocks, I could retire. 24 years on the job, right?
Wasn't that a beautiful thing?
Yes, yes. So as I got to the, you know, I felt like the chief, I won't mention his name, but a very good man, and never took credit for this assignment. He goes, hey, he points up at the board right behind him, and he points to Transit District 34 on Coney Island. I live in Rockland County. That's a 3-hour commute one way, right? 6 hours coming back truck. Without hesitation, I said, I'll take it. And he just like looked at me. I said, I'll take it. I'll drive 100 miles every day. I just want to be a commanding officer anywhere. Because as we know, a commanding officer anywhere is better than an XO.
That's for sure.
Right? So I said, I'll take it. We had a conversation. It wasn't going well. I got up, walked out the office. Right as I hit the threshold to the doorway, he called me back and he goes, Ernie, I'm not making you any promises, but if I can get you a command, you have to promise me you're going to do one thing. And I said, what's that? He goes, you're going to call up everyone who ever said they were going to get you a command, and you're going to thank them. And I go, excuse me? Like, that's ridiculous. And he looked at me sternly in the face, and he goes, you're going to call everyone up that ever promised you a command and thank them. You understand me? Said, yes, sir. 2 days later, I was transferred from the 3-4 to the 3-2 under James Secreto, who was the borough commander back then. And when I asked him, why did you punish me? What did I do wrong? He goes, I didn't punish you. I don't know why they passed you over, but if I send you to the 3-2, they can't pass you over again because now you work in a very busy house. And true to his word, that phone call, that conversation with the chief down in Chief Department's office, 4 days later, I get a call. I'm doing the 412. I'm in my office in the 3-2. And Jimmy Screeto's online. He goes, they're looking at you. And I got scared. Like, who's looking at me? And I go looking through the blind. Like, is the FBI out there? Who's looking at me? And he goes, no, I got a call. I think you're going to get a command. 2 days later, I was notified that I was going to transit. Now, they told me I was going to Transit District 12 in the Bronx, which is great. That's where I became a CO, Transit District 12 in the Bronx. However, like an idiot, I told the chief, and I forget who called me and notified me. I said, wasn't I supposed to go to Transit District 34? That's what I was told. And he goes, is that what you want? I go, no, absolutely not. I'm happy with the Bronx. I can't believe, as I'm repeating it now, I can't believe those words actually left my mouth. But yeah, I did my time in Transit District 12 in the Bronx, which was great. 8 commands out of the 12 in the Bronx. We had great people there. We did great things. We started a great family there where we would go up to Rye Playland on a yearly basis. We would get other commands to cover for us. And the whole command would go there on Family Day. So that was the thing that I wanted to do. I always wanted to build up the cops. I wanted to give them a day when I could that we can celebrate all of their hard work and the victories that we had throughout the years. And that went on for about 2 years. I received my promotion to Deputy Inspector in Transit. I then transferred out and I went to the 4-2. Now, at the time that I went to the 4-2, it was the worst precinct in the city. It was the most sued precinct in the city. And as a matter of fact, that's where bail reform came from. Pedro Hernandez was the 16-year-old kid who was incarcerated in Rikers Island for 2 years without bail. Horrible nightmare stories. On day number 1, I got there. There were protests in front of the command every morning. They would spit on the cops. They would curse on the cops. And after day 2, I just pulled the cops back in and I went out there. You know, the cops were ever protective of their commanding officer, and I appreciated that. But I asked the people what was going on. I invited them into my office. I said, I'll invite you into my office. You're going to be respectful. I'm going to listen to you, and then we're going to resolve whatever issues we have here. And we did that. I heard them because, you know, we're a public service agency. We serve the communities we serve. So I listened to them. And what we did is we started building trust and we started collaborating with one another. Wow, this was a homicide scene. So that's Jeffrey Hart back there. He was Detective Borough Bronx. And this was unfortunately a victim. I forget her name. She was chopped up. Her girlfriend had called her up from her boyfriend's house. He had beat her up. She called her girlfriend up and said, I need you to come over and help me, get me out of here. Her girlfriend shows up to the apartment. Her girlfriend's boyfriend hits her in the back of the head with a hammer, killing her. Her own girlfriend helps her boyfriend chop up the body in the bathtub. They then put it in plastic bags and they dump it in the park in the 4-2. So this was it's been running on all the TV shows, crime shows throughout the years. But that's where that scene was. And my aunt actually sent me this photo. She took care of a screenshot stating that she was watching and she wondered if that was me because I had my hand over my mouth. And the reason why I had my hand over my mouth is because I was talking to the lieutenant right in front of me and Jeffrey Hart. And the press, they read your lips. So I was covering my mouth so they couldn't see, hear, or read what I was saying to them and what I wanted done. So going back on to the 4-2 precinct, we were able to collaborate with the people, the leaders, the elected officials in the 4-2. And I identified an abandoned area in the precincts, which were the cells. And we came up with a Hollywood haunted house. And it was a crazy haunted house. And let me tell you something, nobody, even my XO at the time, Keon Ramsey, who was a newly promoted captain, didn't want me to have this. This isn't what we do. The borough commander at the time, Larry, I forget what Larry's last name is. He didn't want this. This isn't
Larry
what we do.
Kneen. Larry Kneen.
Okay. I don't remember.
The borough commander.
Yes. He didn't want me to do this. And, I've always been hard-headed. I've always gone against the grain. And this is why I had a long, hard, tumultuous career. Rightfully so. Right? I have to look in the mirror and I have to know who I am. But I said, I'm going to do this. If you don't agree with it, relieve me of duty. Right? Because I had to do something for the neighborhood. I wanted to create indelible impressions, especially an underserved community like the 4-2 precinct of South Bronx. We did this haunted house, and it was a real haunted house. I did my research. I empowered the police officers to use their creative imagination and to build this haunted house, and it was great. And we did it. And I'll tell you, you know how many crimes I took in the South Bronx on Halloween day during the hours of operation? South Bronx, 4-2. How many crimes did I take? Zero in the South Bronx. That's next to impossible. But the credibility that built up, what politicians said, what the community council president said, he never saw people running into a command before. They were always running away because the 3 times you come across the police, unfortunately, you're the victim of a crime, you're being arrested, or you're getting bad news that someone was hurt, right? So we gave them a reason to come be part of the police and see that they can have a good time and have indelible impressions, build indelible impressions. They're going to remember that they were scared in the precinct for good. After 2 years successfully, 0 crimes during the hours of operation for that haunted house, I decided one day that, you know what, I wanted to convert that into a winter wonderland. So I converted that into a winter wonderland, which was a North Pole. You went through the tour of the North Pole. Then you came into our muster room and you met Santa Claus. And we hired a real Santa Claus. We rented one, $400, real beard, not no cotton stuff, real beard. This is what he did for a living. I believe it was Kris Kringle. And we had our gifts wrapped. And the reason why I always wrap my gifts, this was the 3rd year we did this, but we did it to this extent where we had the tour of the North Pole and then Kris Kringle waiting for you in the muster room. I always wrap my gifts because when you give individuals, even parents, a choice, they get crazy and they want what they perceive as being the best gift. So by wrapping it, I serve 2 purposes. There are some kids in underserved communities that don't have the privilege of opening up a gift. It's number 1. And number 2, I didn't want fights in the command over this toy is better than that toy. So you got a wrap gift based on the perceived gender of the individual, the child, by age. So we did boys 8 to 10, girls 8 to 10, and so on. So when you walked up to Santa Claus, the parent would give us their names. So by the time the child got up to Kris Kringle, he knew their age, how old they were. And then he would give them a gift, and they would go on, get cocoa, hot cocoa, and cookies, and they would leave. Listen, we had the neighborhood come in, sing Christmas carols in front of the command. And what I can tell you, factually, you could check the numbers, crime went down to 10-year lows. People, not because we're a genius, because they trusted us. So when an incident was about to take place, they would call the desk and they would tell us, hey, this is about to happen. You may want to send someone over here. So we would rapidly deploy our RMPs to that area and quash the problem before it even started. And that worked. For that, I was rewarded and I was transferred to Housing Borough, Bronx, Queens. Skip go. You don't get your $200. No promotion. So, hey, you know, I was called downtown, by the way. I'll tell you this. I was called downtown and I had a conversation with a chief who said, listen, there are certain people in this building that are being bothered by the attention a certain deputy inspector is getting in the South Bronx. I don't know why, but I will watch myself. Well, true to his word, you know, like I said, 3 weeks after Christmas, I was transferred to Housing Borough, Bronx, Queens, no promotion. Okay, the new CEO who came in 3 weeks after me, promoted to full bird 3 weeks after he got there. That's the way it is. That's the politics of the job. Take it or leave it. However, it was at that moment that I realized I'm going to start looking for my next adventure, my next job, as you will, right? I could have stayed in the NYPD. I could have probably rode the wave and made it 1 or 2 ranks higher. Maybe, maybe not.
Ernie, hold up.
Go ahead.
Before we talk about the time at the Housing Borough, Bronx, Queens, is one incident. Rob and I have covered this in the past when we talk about active shooters, and we know that you're showing up here. These are heavy vests.
Yeah.
You know,
So
when I retired, I don't even know where that. I think that vest is still in the closet at Housing Bronx, Queens. The vest that they gave us, that the heavy duty vest like this. What level is that, Rob? That vest?
That's actually that's a 4, but it's a plate carrier. That's not. It's not a vest, right? It has to be. That's supposed to be used in conjunction with your other vest. So
Ernie's wrong.
Hey, you know what? Not only am I wrong, I was at the end of my duty. I was the duty inspector. This is Bronx Lebanon Hospital. Only active shooter incident we had.
I mean, something's better than nothing, right?
Right. So, you know, 7 people were injured. 1 unfortunately was killed. The nurse, the doctor, she was the doctor that was killed. Henry Bayo was the doctor who was terminated from Bronx Lebanon Hospital. He had come back in with his jacket, his gown, his doctor's gown. He had the rifle underneath his gown. He walked in. The doctor he ended up killing was covering for the target he actually wanted, which is unfortunate. Young lady, I believe she was about 32 years old, and he shot and killed her. And as the team was moving in on him, like 90% of the cowards, active shooter cowards, he killed himself. He went into a room, he put the rifle up on his chest, he pulled the trigger, he walked out, collapsed on the floor, and he died. It's an unfortunate incident, but you know, nevertheless, that's what that picture was in the 4th floor.
Were you the duty inspector that day? Or
I was the duty inspector, so I was the day tour duty inspector, and that happened at the tour change. As I was, you know, that's why I'm in like civilian clothes. I'm ready to go home. I'm changing. I get the call. I hear the call on the radio, and I'm thinking like, this is a drill. Level 1, level 2. We have an active shooter, and I'm thinking it has to be a drill. This can't be real. Then I start hearing people screaming, and I'm going, oh my God, this is real. Let me get in there. I grabbed what I had, and I just shot to the scene. I'd rather show up to the scene ununiformed than not be there at all.
Yeah, no. Yeah, absolutely.
Right? It's a live scene. You have to take control of the situation. You have to control the officers. so they don't do dumb things, because that's what young officers want to do. They want to get right into the fire, not understanding the consequences, and you have to slow the scene down to the point that, hey, where's our shooter? Let's get him stopped immediately, but let's do so in a safe manner.
Yeah. No, I know
No
that was a,
elevators, right? Freeze the elevators, go up the steps. And it was high. I think we had to go up to the 14th floor.
that's crazy.
All right. So like I said, we transition out of the NYPD, another big thing in your life, you spoke about your military career. I think maybe after we get through your law enforcement career, we talk a little bit more about what you did in the military. I think, you did some really good stuff in the military. But something that's a love of yours, and something that you're still very actively involved with today, I see on all your social media. And there's that smile again.
That's right. Hey, listen, I've always been a health buff, and I say that because, like I said, after my unfortunate beginnings, it was through sports that kept me out of trouble, helped me invest in my body. And when I can no longer box at a certain age, whether you want to admit it or not, which is pretty young, right? You get to like 34, 35, which is very young, but not for professional sports. You're going to get crushed by these younger kids. And I still had a lot of energy, and I wanted to do something. And I always hated running, but running seemed to be my peace. When I run, that's when I'm my happiest. I do a lot of my thinking running. I clear my mind, and it works for me. It keeps me in shape. And I've now have 38 marathons under my belt. 21 of those are a New York City marathon. That's my daughter. And this was the last marathon we did together, our fourth. And this was in Cleveland, Ohio. We did that about 2 months ago, 8 weeks ago in Cleveland, Ohio. And that was my 38th. So I'm in the process of completing all 50 states. I have 12 states right now. My 13th state will be Nebraska, August 29th. Saturday, August 29th is my next one. Then I'll possibly do Louisiana, New Orleans, Louisiana, in November. Next year, sometime. Then I have New Hampshire sometime next year. Well, I'm also going to do my 8th star, which I just missed. I was invited to Cape Town. So this photo right here was in London. This is when I earned my 6 stars. So I'm in the Abbott World Marathon Majors. That's what they are. There are currently 8 of them. That's why I just said I missed Cape Town. I didn't realize it counted. So this year I'll go in to get my 8th star, but I'm up to 7 stars. So I've run Japan, Germany, London, where I earned my 6th star, Australia, Boston, Chicago, and New York. In 2027, I will go to Cape Town to get my 8th star. And then eventually, when Shanghai, China is approved, that will become the 9th star, and they'll make this 9-star medal. Now, there are several members in the NYPD who have since went on and accomplished that medal. However, I was the very first person in the NYPD to achieve that. And I was fortunate enough, CBS did a real big story on me about it. They had me running on the video and everything like this. It was a real good story about how I did this. And I always appreciate that the NYPD gave me this opportunity to represent them. And wow, just to travel the world and keep doing something I love. It's amazing, because running 26.2 miles or 42.2 kilometers is no easy feat. It's challenging, it's hard, and you have to constantly sacrifice a lot to stay in that kind of shape. And now that my daughter's running, one rule I have for her is to always stay in half marathon shape, right? 13.1 miles. Then you can build on that, because the sacrifice it takes to run the marathon is extraordinary.
Does it take determination, dedication, and discipline, Ernie?
Yeah, absolutely. My 3 Ds: determination, dedication, and discipline. That's my mantra. That's what I live on. There have been a lot of marathons when I'm running where I just wanted to give up. Believe it or not, because of my arrogance, there are a lot of. I've been known to run several marathons without training at all, and those are my worst marathons. And marathon running is like fighting. You always know how it's going to end. It's going to end with pain. right? But it's something I look forward to doing. And I hope that even after, by the time I finish all 50 states, that'll be my 75th, about my 75th marathon. So I hope that I'll go to 100 and maybe I'll be done then. Or maybe I'll start competing I find that as I'm getting older, believe it or not, I'm getting faster. So I'm starting to win awards for my age group.
Nice.
I worked a couple of marathons.
Yeah. Well, you had better time than I did then, for sure.
I'll tell you a funny story, and I guess you can relate and understand this. Something I never knew. I worked the start of the New York City Marathon at the base of the Verrazano Bridge one year, and I was right there. And just before the cannon goes off, all of a sudden there was a wave of fluid that came down the ramp.
Yes, it's golden. It's the golden fluid.
The golden fluid. Everybody empties their bladder just before, and there's, thousands of people standing there ready to start, waiting for the cannon to go off to start running up the Verrazano. And all of a sudden, we're all jumping on top of those concrete pillars, ballards, because this golden fluid is flowing. And somebody's like, "That's piss." I'm like, "What?" And they explained to me, everybody, all the runners, the real marathon runners, they'll empty their bladder just before they start.
And what you don't know,
little strange thing to throw in there, but
no, but under the underdeck of the Verrazano Bridge, you have runners starting there as well. Unfortunately, I was there one year where the New York Road Runners Club decided they weren't going to honor the NYPD FDNY relationship, where we always hold a chain to hold back everyone else from the elite runners. This year, whoever the director was got it in their head that they weren't going to honor that. So they put us on the bottom. So that golden shower sprayed all over us. It was terrible. Yes, we got sprayed. So that was what they did for us. So I'm glad that they're honoring their long-standing tradition of having the NYPD and the FDNY represent not only our departments, but the whole city as a whole. So yeah, those were great times.
Yeah, I used to, when special operations, we used to always be at the beginning, and you always used to see the girls and the guys. They'd all try to go behind the little barrier or whatever, and they all take a squat, and they'd all go to the bathroom and stuff. So, but yeah, no, in 2001, I ran the New York City Marathon. I didn't do a good time because 9/11 had happened, and I wasn't able to train as much as I would, so my time wasn't as good as I could do. But for the amount of ones that you did, oh my God, that's crazy. You must be in phenomenal shape that you could just go right out there cold and just start running one without training. But great advice for your daughter. I mean, yeah, do the 13-1, right, and stay in shape for the mini or the half, and you're ready to go, right? Because I think even when I was training, they said once you start running 13 to 15 miles, you don't even have to, practice a 26.2 because you're going to be able to do it. You're going to have the stamina to do it. So, but it was tough, but it was definitely fun. And when, I'm sure you still feel it, right? When you cross that finish line, it's such a great feeling when you cross that finish line and you make it, man. It's such an accomplishment. But congratulations to you.
Thank you, thank you. As you know, everyone who crosses that finish line is a winner.
Yeah.
Because when they place that medal over your neck, wow, you know what you went through, and you earned that medal, and that in itself is well worth it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Good stuff. Yeah, I know. And Rob, you still run on a regular basis to keep yourself in shape.
Yeah. So my wife and I, we usually run 3 miles a day or whatever. Sometimes we'll do more, but yeah, we try to get out there every day. So
yeah,
I love it too.
I run to Stop and Shop and pick up the groceries, and sometimes I'll stop at Carvel for the kids.
All right, that's good. Yeah.
Hey, the last time I saw you, you look good, so it's working.
That's right. The last time I saw Ernie was actually about a month ago, and I don't know if you want to transition into the boxing now, but or finish up the law enforcement first. But I was actually driving down Cross Bay Boulevard. I said to my wife, I said, "There's Ernie." She goes, "Ernie who?" I said, "Ernie Morales from." She goes, "From your old office?" I'm like, "Yeah." I said, "He's walking into." So I bang a U-turn. I pull over, and you're walking in with your wife. And I get out the car. I'm like, Ernie. She's like, shut up, you idiot. I'm like, no, I'm telling you, it's Ernie. He turns around. We saw each other. We hadn't seen each other for quite a few years. But
Yes.
again, that's the great thing about this job. When you make relationships and you see people, even if it's a few years or whatever, it's like almost like, I mean, we've, a couple of times we've seen you in the chat or, message back and forth on LinkedIn or whatever the case may be. But, when you see somebody, it's always good to see people that you had worked with or that you had, shared experiences with this job. So let's stick with the job. We'll talk about your boxing career and your athletic commission career, after. But let's stick with the job because you touched on it. You touched on that you were in the mentoring program, and I was never technically in the mentoring program, but I was assigned in my borough to mentor the young, the newer executives that were coming up and even some, executives that were getting their first commands. I used to sit down with them and, explain, it's difficult. That's like you said, the hardest transitions on this job, and Rob and I have talked about this in the past, cop to sergeant, lieutenant to captain, right? Because you go into a supervisory rank where you're no longer just responsible for yourself and your partner to being responsible for a squad of people or a platoon of people, that's working. And then executive, you really, when you I know some people in the chat don't like when we call captains and above executives, but when you hit that executive core in the NYPD, it is different and there's a lot more that's expected of you, and you have a lot more responsibility, a lot of duties and responsibilities that extend so far past even your on and your off duty time, and there's just a lot to it. So when we have a lot of time in rank, giving that experience and sharing that experience with younger executives is important. And I know that you were part of the mentoring program, and one of the people that we both had the honor, the opportunity to mentor, you mentioned him before, was Keon Ramsey. He was your executive officer in the 4-2 precinct, and then he wound up coming to me when I was the CEO of the Housing Bronx Queens as the commanding officer of PSA 8. Intelligent young captain, which again needed mentoring because again he was young in rank, but he was very passionate. He was intelligent. He worked great with the community. He got put into that position. A lot of people were not the happiest because, like you, other people got skipped over with more time in rank. So, but he actually, this is the day he actually took over from Julie Murill, who retired as a 1-star. Well, I don't know if Julie's retired or if she's still on the job.
Julie's still on. Julie's
still on a 1-star. Is she back in risk management?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure, but when she was the CEO of PSA 8 and I was the borough commander, she came to me and she said, listen, I'm getting an opportunity to go back to go to risk management. I'm like you, I don't hold people back. Like, God bless you. If it's a good career move for you, then let's do it, and we'll deal with it and we'll take care of it. And then Keon Ramsey came in, and this was the day that he took over. I went over and for the old pin swap where she presented him with the pin for PSA 8, and Keon began his real executive experience as the CEO of PSA 8, and that's where he was still in contact with you and still had a relationship with you, but him and I became close. We still talk occasionally. He's off the job now. He's working with the Metropolitan Transit Authority Police, and
assistant chief, 2-star chief.
Yes, yep. And it's funny because he rose through the ranks, right, and wound up. We were both off the job, but he wound up outranking both of us. As I don't have the pictures up yet. He came up, and then he wound up being an assistant, a deputy chief, Rob's rank, when Rob retired, and wound up being the executive officer of Patrol Borough Bronx. Right. So, but he texted me when I had texted him and asked him if he had any pictures, you know, and for his picture, because I knew I wanted to talk about Keon. I'm just going to give you, you know, because it's always nice to hear what people have to say when they're not saying it to you. So it's like, you know, they're not forced words. And, you know, so, but this is what Keon had texted back to me. I had just texted him, you know, listen, you know, do you have any pictures, whatever. So, you know, I said, you know, Ernie, I know Ernie was one of your mentors. So definitely a mentor like yourself, real people, not afraid to be human and be a boss at the same time. From CompStat to time management with home life to outside opportunities and education. Ernie showed me a lot. So, and then he said, you know, I don't have many pictures, but those were his words. And like I said, it's always nice to hear, you know, what other people are saying, you know, what people say about you when they're not saying it to yourself, that, you know, they're telling the truth. He has no reason to say anything. And I can tell you firsthand from many conversations that I had with Keon, of what high regard that he held you in, for your mentorship and your leadership. When I used to call him, you know, you're a real Ernie fanboy, you know. He loves Ernie. He loves him some Ernie. But like you said, yeah, now he left the job. He got an opportunity. He went over with Mike Kemper, and
Yes.
he's a 2-star chief over at the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, the MTA police. And I laughed. So I texted him. I said, I'm waiting to have to drop your name when one of your guys pulls me over on one of the Rockaway bridges. And he laughed. He goes, be sure to. So now it's like, you know, I'm mentoring this kid. Now I'm going to have to drop his name if one of his guys pulls me over.
You know, Keon gave me one of the best gifts I ever had in my whole NYPD career. And I finished up with 32. I left the job with just a little under 30 to go to Mount Vernon, but my time carried me over to 32. Never reported sick. Never, ever reported sick. But the best gift he gave me a poster, and he captured my whole life in this one poster. From a small kid, you know, when I started out boxing, to being an executive in the NYPD. And I asked him, where did you get these photos from? Because I didn't provide him these photos. And in his speech, he goes, what do you give the man who already has it all? And then he unveiled this poster of my whole life captured there. He's a big Star Wars fan.
Yeah.
And it was in the letters of the Star Wars, right? And I got it in talking to Keon, why Star Wars means so much to him. And it was incredible. I came across Keon as the 3rd platoon commander in the Trans 12 when I was the CO there. And I knew then, I told him, you know, I need you to take the captain's exam because you're sharp, you're intelligent, and you will one day pass me on this job. And I was absolutely correct. You absolutely knew he was a talent. So when he got promoted to captain, I remember going down, I had CompStat, and his captain's class came in to observe us, give our presentations, and I was up as the CO in the 4-2, and I had gone to him and I told him, hey, Keon, you know, I want you in the 4-2 to be my XO. And he goes, oh, I'm spoken for. I'm going Manhattan North. And, you know, we already know the calls were made, right? And I just looked at him and I go, oh, you're going to Manhattan North. Okay. So he goes back to BMOC. They give him the assignment and they go, Keon, you're the XO, the 4-2. He goes, you should have known. Now, I didn't understand why he didn't want to come to the 4-2 at the time, and I should have did my homework. I didn't realize that Keon had been a police officer in the 4-2. So he didn't want to go back to his original command where he still had relationships with the police officers there. But as he states his words, not mine, it was the best assignment he could have had as an executive officer, and I believe it worked out. So I'm happy that he moved up the ranks. He's doing well for himself because that's a very good man.
Yeah, he's a good man. And listen, he came from humble beginnings. He one of the things, you know, he understood about housing is he grew up in public housing. You know, so, you know, he came and he did a great job over there. You know, and again, you know, he learned and he paid it forward. And like I said, he was the CO of PSA 8, even though Brian, Mulkeen was not from housing. He was from the Bronx Borough Crime Unit. It still happened on one of his developments. He took it very personal. And I remember having to have a real heart-to-heart with him, that, it's an unfortunate part of policing that these things may happen. And there's nothing he could have done, to change it. And it was just, that was a terrible night, like we said before. But yeah,
This is my walkout, my retirement here, right here.
Yep.
So that would be July 20th, 2020, a Thursday. Memory serves me correct. Yeah.
I don't know if it was a Thursday. I remember we had a good time. It was a good send-off. That's when you made your announcement.
Listen, Rob, you know what this was? This was a living wake.
Yeah.
It was a living wake. Wow. In the middle of COVID, to see so many people come out and risk themselves, risk their health, to come say goodbye, my family being there. Wow. It was a living wake. It was a living wake. It was much more than I ever anticipated or expected. And I will forever be grateful for that reception.
Yeah, no, it's nice to have that, the memory of and everybody, all your friends there. So it's a nice send off, after all your hard work.
Yes.
Rob's not a fan.
What's that?
Not a fan of walkouts.
I actually had to drive out where I didn't ask them to drive. I didn't ask them for a walk. I didn't want to walk out, so I just said, all right. So they did the last day. There was a caravan. We all put our lights on at Floyd Bennett Field, drove all the way out and all the way down Flatbush Avenue. So that was, I think I might have only drive out. So,
that's nice. That's nice.
Yeah.
Did you have a helicopter overhead?
No. We can't get into that. That's a whole nother story. There may or may not have been a helicopter there.
Yeah. So that's where you ended your NYPD career. We had the mayor of Mount Vernon was also in attendance that day, and you
as
announced
well as the police commissioner
and the police commissioner, and they were there. Very nice lady. What was her name? I'm sorry, I forget her name.
Sean Patterson Howard.
Right. And so that's when you announced that somebody blew it for you in one of the prior speeches. You had the Mount Vernon hat under the podium waiting to put it on, and you had your whole tricky thing. You were going to take off your 8-pointer and put on your new Mount Vernon hat, and somebody blew it for you. I forget who it was. Do you remember who it was?
I don't remember who it was, but it still went off good. All the people that were there, they didn't realize what was happening.
Yeah,
when it happened. So I did it like college, right? I had the NYPD cap on, and then I go, hey, I'm not leaving because of the political terms. We're raised to deal with the current political environment, right? We're a political organization. I don't care about the politicians. I just had my NYPD hat on, and I said, I'm leaving because of a better opportunity. And I just went under the podium and I switched off the NYPD hat for the Mount Vernon hat. That was it. And then I went on to what was going to be, and I was always a friend. Please reach out. And this is the day I was sworn in, that following Tuesday. So I had the weekend off, and I got into Mount Vernon that Tuesday to be sworn in. Another great day, a great reception in Mount Vernon as well.
Look, tell us about your time in Mount Vernon.
So, I did 18 months in Mount Vernon under Glenn A. Scott, who was the police commissioner, a great man, great honorable man as well. And I say that because he's since passed away, unfortunately, but he was a man with a vision. He had served in the Mount Vernon Police Department. He went up through the ranks, made it up to the ranks of lieutenant during Sean Patterson Howard's campaign. He worked with her. When she was elected, she appointed him to be her police commissioner. At that time, Glenn was looking for a first deputy police commissioner. I came across this by accident. I was on YouTube. I came across YouTube and I saw two individuals who were talking to the community. I quickly realized that this was an interview for the position. And I was insulted and I wanted to know why no one had reached out to me and asked me if I was interested in the position. Because what people don't know is I passed up the police commissioner position twice, not once, twice. And that was when I was first appointed as a commanding officer in Transit District 12 in the Bronx under then Richard Thomas. He came, had lunch with me in the confines of the Transit District 12. We went to a restaurant, we had a conversation. I called up my wife. My wife was a state employee at the time. She was familiar with the family. She felt it wasn't the best move for me at the time. Fine. I was happy with my new assignment as a commanding officer. I rode that wave. I believe 6 months to a year later, I think frustration started setting in. I reached out to Richard Thomas again. He was the mayor at the time. I said if the position was still available, which it was an interim basis. I said I would be interested in applying for the job. He said I would have to apply because he was sending it out for a national search. We went through the process. They picked me. I was number one out of their national search. Came in, met with members from the community as well as the city council. I came in. When it came time to the negotiations, the then first deputy commissioner, who was the acting commissioner, Sean Harris, who I've known for over 30 years. We served in the Navy as well. Sean was the acting police commissioner. You know, we had our conversations and everything. And after my meeting with the mayor at City Hall, I came out. Sean had a conversation with me, told me about how, you know, this was his job. He wanted the position. I spoke to my wife, and my wife said, hey, think about this. Is your friendship worth a job? Right? And I said, no, absolutely not. And that was it. I went back to NYPD. Well, I stayed with the NYPD. Sean had the job, got the job, received the job. I was very happy for him. He had his run. After that, Mayor Sean Patterson Howard was elected, brought me in. I sat with Glenn. He was going over my resume. And I remember for the first hour, we were supposed to meet for 40 minutes. We ended up talking for about 2 hours. And it was about 40 minutes into the interview where I told him, stop, because he was dictating my resume. And I told him, this isn't about the resume. What this is about is whether you and I get along with one another. So let's have a conversation. So we sat there and we spoke for about an hour and a half, and we were kicking it back and forth. And it was a smooth, simple conversation. And he then asked if I had time. I said I was on his time. He called up the mayor and went over to City Hall. I spoke with the mayor. The three of us spoke together, and we had a productive conversation. And they told me what they wanted. I said what I can deliver. I was very clear on what I could deliver. I was very clear on when I started my job not to hold me back, because I was going to complete the task. Everything was in agreement. This was the best day, one of the best days of my life, being sworn in as the first deputy police commissioner in Mount Vernon. I went in to serve. Great professional police department. They had their faults. They don't have a great budget. They have many challenges. But we were trying to build that. We were trying to work on building morale. We were trying to put a professional, in my mind, a professional police department together, just like the NYPD. The challenges in smaller police departments is you have individuals who have been in these police departments 5, 10, 15 years. And when they make rank, all of the animosity they have against one another, they take it out on each other. It's not like in New York City where we get sent to another borough, Manhattan North, Manhattan South, the Bronx, Queens, and you may never come across the same individual again. So we have that luxury. In these smaller departments, you don't have that luxury. And as you're trying to hold people accountable for their behavior, because it's a smaller department, smaller community. Politics gets in the way. Politics gets in the way. Someone's blessed, and you say, well, this is what they did. Well, this is how you're going to take care of it. Well, that really isn't fair to other subordinates within the department who do the same thing or something of a lesser infraction, and they get held a much worse penalty. So politics got in the way. Not to say anything about her leadership. She's a great leader, great mayor. I had a great time in Mount Vernon, but eventually my time came on to move on. My daughter had gotten married. She got pregnant. We were having our first grandchild. My wife said, "You were never there for our children. You're certainly not going to miss our first grandchild arriving." So it was a great time to step away from Mount Vernon because my daughter was living in Georgia at the time. So we had to be down in Georgia for the birth of our first grandchild, and that was great. So I was at the right place at the right time when I needed to be there. And
Hey, did you get a lot of pushback from the rank and file? Like, you're an outsider coming into a department where there's a lot of they've all been there for years. Like you said, there's a lot of institutional knowledge. There's a lot of probably, they all stick together. Was there a lot of pushback when you became the first deputy commissioner? Because you're coming from like, oh, you're the NYPD, like, everything, and now you're coming to Mount Vernon. So I was just curious if there was any type of animosity, and how did you deal with it if there was?
So there definitely was animosity, right? I had identity crisis where I was so loved in the NYPD. However, I go to Mount Vernon and I'm not so loved. I'm loved by a few, but not the majority. And I would have police officers who would come across and they would tell me, I ran into this person, I ran into that person from NYPD. They loved you. And I go, isn't that ironic? They love me in a department of over 30,000, but you come here to the Mount Vernon Police Department where there's 200 and you guys aren't really feeling me because we were doing our job the way it was taught to us in the NYPD and in the military to hold people accountable for what they do. Right. So, there was pushback, but, I also took it personal. I was in the Mount Vernon Police Department as first deputy police commissioner. I had duty and service to the people within that city, and I wanted to represent them well under the leadership of Mayor Sean Harris, Patterson Howard, who I absolutely respected, absolutely do respect to this day. She's the mayor, and she's the one who dictates how she wants her city run.
All right. So
go ahead.
So go ahead.
No, it was from there. Like I said, we went down to Georgia. We spent time getting familiar with our grandchild at the time. Now we're up to 2. We're going to go to 3. So it's great. We're enjoying our time, flying all back and forth.
Yeah, I always watch your social media. You're always on the move. You're always on the move, right. Running around all over the place and spending a lot of time in Puerto Rico, as you know.
Yes.
99 Angels 39. Somebody in the chats in here today. I'm sure because of you, because it's the first time I'm seeing them in here. When you left the 3-2 precinct, they took that painting off that you hung behind the desk, the one that depicted the difference between a boss and a leader. Some bosses weren't fans of that painting. So
That's
yeah,
right.
we've talked about that in the past, Rob and I, and there's various different pictures and but they all basically say the same thing. The difference between what the difference between a leader is and a boss is. And what I always say is, listen, you're a boss or a supervisor by virtue of your rank alone. It does not make you a leader. A leader, you become a leader by your actions and your ability to have those those subordinates, follow you and accomplish those missions that you need to get done and do it. And your influence could change the outcome of their actions, not by force, but by influence.
Absolutely. And I think that's very important because, as I stated, you want to create individuals and officers that are going to be aware of their surroundings. They're going to survive, go home to their families at the end of the day. Because as we know, as executives, we do send people out with the prospect that they may never come back.
right.
So we have to arm them with the tools to make it back home safely. And they may not always appreciate our approach, but understand we have our best intentions and your best intentions to get home safely, to do it correctly, so that you get through a career without possibly never being hurt, never firing your firearm, and retiring and enjoying a long, fruitful life after the job. Because there is life after the job. I never understood what that meant while I was on the job, but once I got out of the job, I don't know why I stayed so long. As long as I did.
Yeah, and if we talk about family and time away from our family, and we've all experienced it. You've been able to navigate through the landmines of life, the job, your career, your multiple careers, your military career, your NYPD career, your boxing, your athletic commission career, which we'll talk about in a little bit too. And you've been able to maintain that. Kudos to you, kudos to your wife. I say it. One of the reasons I left the job too was I have two older children from my first marriage. I have two younger children from my current marriage, and I don't want to make the same mistakes twice either. And now, even though now when I go places, it's like, oh, you're so close, it's so nice to see you so close to your grandfather.
Right.
But yeah, so I understand, and we spoke about this too. Sometimes you get some perks and everything from, connections that you've made and relationships that you've made. We talked about it before, how you've maintained relationships after the job and everything else. And I've always said it too. I say a couple of different things. I said it last night, but it's not, or maybe I said it in the chat in today's Finest Unfiltered show. It's a quote from Joe Fox, retired chief of transit, and it's when we talk about advancing on your career and advancing through your career, it's not always who you know. People talk about having that hook, having that rabbi, having that person that's going to take care of them their whole career. It's not always about who you know, but it's about who knows you. And people get to know you through your work ethic and through your, performance and the accomplishments that you do. And that's a very important thing. And it always, it's about relationships, like you talked about earlier, Ernie, and we talk about too. You don't shit on the people below you because they're below you. You don't even shit on people that are at your same level. You treat everybody with kindness and respect. Even if you don't care for them, you don't care for the way that they act. You try to navigate those things as best as you can. It took me a long time in my career to learn to have a filter. So it's funny that I'm on the Unfiltered network now, right? But it took me a long time to have a filter. There's plenty of Leyson quotes out there that people can't believe that things that came out of my mouth or things that I've done. But it's very important because it's funny how people don't realize in policing, in law enforcement, it doesn't have to be the super chief that's going to take care of you. It could be a detective in the right position that has the ability to do you a favor, to take care of something, or a sergeant or a lieutenant that worked for you in the past.
PAA, man.
A PAA, 100% of which, for those in the chat that aren't NYPD, it's a police administrative aide, which is one of the lowest entry level civilians in the NYPD. And they may be working in a position where they could do something for you if it needs to be done.
PAA that comes to mind, Deidre and the Aussie, 4-4 PAA. There for over 2 decades. My God, the influence that Deidre has, the influence that she has is amazing.
Yeah.
So,
what's this the saying goes, right? Don't step on the toes that attach to the ass you may have to kiss later on in your career.
Somebody said that earlier. Somebody said that in the chat earlier,
Did
Rob.
they say that in the chat? Yeah.
They did. Somebody said that in the chat earlier. I didn't actually put it up. Go ahead, Ernie. Talk about this while I look for that comment. That's funny. You said that Rob said that.
This was great. I had called my wife. I received a call from a friend in the Secret Service, and he stated that, he was retired NYPD, right? It goes all about relationships, how well you treat someone. I had worked with him in narcotics. Those relationships matter because when Barack Obama was president of the United States, number 44, the member called me. He said, "Hey, would you like to meet the president? He's going to be coming in. I'll give you the location." They revealed this very last minute. So you have to be ready, right? Be dressed, be ready. I'm going to give you a call. You're going to report. You'll be screened. You have to be pre-approved. So I got the family together. We went to the location, and we went in to not only get to take a photo in front of Air Force One, but we actually got to meet Barack Obama. Now, I've been told maybe once, twice, maybe a lot more than that I resemble Barack Obama. And it's funny because as the president goes down the line, he shakes your hand with both hands. 1, 1, 1, going down the line. He came across my wife. He grabs both her hands. And I say to him, they say I look like you. They never say you look like me. Keep that moving. So it was good, the children, to be exposed to that, to meet the president, and to understand that that's what the sacrifices bring. They bring certain perks and certain opportunities that the general public isn't privy to. So I've always appreciated that. Even, I should have put it in here. I had one, so I took my wife to Central Park where we actually met the Pope when the Pope came to New York, and he went through Central Park. So that was another big highlight of my career. Things that, the average citizen doesn't get to do. So we get a front row seat to the best shows on earth.
Yeah.
And it's always been amazing because of that.
Yeah, no, it's true. All right, so now you leave Mount Vernon.
Yes, I take time off. I'm working with the New York State Athletic Commission. I've been working with them for years while I was in NYPD as well. And, that was a great transition from my professional career to get back into something I absolutely love, to be on the front lines, to see the best boxing matches, professional matches that come to New York State, all combat sports. So it wasn't only professional boxing, it's professional wrestling, as well as UFC, when UFC was approved from Albany. So we had a hard time before UFC was approved. And that was because of politics up in Albany. And people don't realize that, right? Like to hold a show in New York State, you need an insurance policy of $1 million now. So that drove a lot of the small promoters out. And this is because of an incident that took place in Madison Square Garden where a heavyweight fight had taken place and the fighter spoke Russian. So he had broke his hand in the process of the boxing match. However, he had suffered a traumatic brain injury too. We didn't know it at the time. And there weren't protocols in place, the right protocols in place. There were, but some people messed up, didn't do their jobs, right? This is where we had to later on appoint deputy commissioners to help the inspectors do their job from A, B, C to D, and making sure that a fighter is taken to the ambulance. Even if they refuse, you don't get your check until you step onto that ambulance. You go RMA from there, you're in their custody. You're no longer in our custody. That process wasn't followed. New York State was sued for about $12 million. We had to pay out. New York State said, hey, this goes on the promoters now. The promoters should have paid for that, not the state. So now the promoters have to have that insurance policy in place. But that drove out, like I said, a lot of the smaller promoters. This is when I was 19 years old, my first professional fight. It's great shape. I was 130 pounds in that photo right there, 8% body fat. When I went to the police academy, I actually got out of shape. I was in better shape when I went in. So, I still move, I still stay busy, but I can't compete anymore. These kids are too fast. But we were successful in getting UFC into New York, and I respect those athletes. Those athletes, absolutely. That was my first professional fight over in Gleason's gym. My wife got me that as a gift to memorialize that day. It's a great day. Great day. Yep. This is everything I worked for, and I'm happy I had the opportunity. Thomas Hitman Hearns, one of the 4 legends. Yeah. Adrian Broner, 4 division champions, second youngest to do that behind Oscar De La Hoya. Unfortunately, wow, big disappointment.
Really?
He's not doing so well now. He's becoming an obsessive gambler. He drinks a lot. He has a podcast, so he's making money on the podcast, but is watching them destroy his life and drinking. And here was a kid who was world champion at 22, so talented. He won. This was the 3rd division. He won the welterweight championship that night, beating Paulie Malignaggi. And it was great to celebrate that moment with him. And to watch his decline is rather disappointing and depressing.
He's making money doing podcasting. You got his number?
He's with, I forget, Don the Great. If you look up Adrian Broner, all you got to do is Adrian Broner. Google his name, and you see everything. Floyd Money Mayweather. This guy made close to $1 billion throughout his career. $1 billion with no endorsements. Unfortunately, rumors are that he's broke now. He's bankrupt. People taking advantage of him and his lack of education. But this guy owns buildings, all those skyscrapers in New York. He's part of that. He owns buildings on Grand Concourse. So he was all in that. He has a beautiful home in Las Vegas where he has over 100 cars, $3 million cars, Bugattis, Rolls Royces, things that he doesn't even need. And that's how he lives his life. So that's the mistake that a lot of fighters make, is they live like drug dealers. They always believe that money is going to keep coming in. They forget at some point the gravy train is going to stop, and they have an entourage of 100 people, and they're paying all these people, right? And when you run out of money, they all abandon you. And that's when you truly find out who your friends are. So, but Money Mayweather, wow, undefeated, 50-0. Joseph Bellino, his son was my commanding officer, Captain Bellino in the United States Navy. And Joseph Bellino, he autographed that football for me. And why is that special? Because Joe Bellino was a Heisman Trophy winner. There have only been 2 Heisman Trophy winners in the history of the Navy. Do you know who the other Heisman Trophy winner was? Roger Staubach. Dallas Cowboys.
Wow.
Yeah, right.
Joseph Bellino and Roger Staubach. And if you like, I don't know, Google, if you go to one of these sites, eBay, to see how much that football is worth, his football, Joe Bellino's, actually worth more than Roger Staubach when I last looked it up. So I still have that football upstairs.
Nice.
He's since passed away. Yes.
So, Ernie, all right. So tell us a little bit about, so we're talking about that before we move on to the Metro Transit PD, your last law enforcement stint. And the sun's going down upstate. I guess you're getting a little dark there. You got a light in there, maybe.
Let me turn on the light. Better? Is that better?
Now we got the real shine in that.
I see the glare. Yes.
Big glare. Yeah. That's your head.
Yeah.
Oh.
But hey, listen,
you're messing with a boxer there. Be careful, Ron.
He's far enough. I'm out of his reach. I may not be quick, but I can keep out of his reach. But explain to the audience, what exactly an assistant commissioner for the, New York State sport. What's the exact title? New York State Sports.
So New York State Athletic Commission. New York
Athletic Commission. Right.
So we're responsible for all combat sports, regulating the rules and regulations, making sure that they follow the rules. Right. There's an extensive medical history that they go through, background before they come in. They get screened. If they have any deficiencies, they aren't going to be cleared to fight in New York State. And we have that insurance policy in place for that, just in case they do manage to get by and they don't have injury or they incur an injury during the events. but that goes for UFC as well. Let me tell you something. UFC, I have respect for those athletes. They go in there and they fight. You know, there's a big difference between boxing and UFC, and I want to state that for everybody out here. You know, in boxing, you have to understand that the purpose is to go in there and try to knock out your opponent, and you're hitting them for 10 to 12 rounds in the head. Where 8-ounce gloves, 147 and below, anything above 147 is 10-ounce gloves. But those gloves are not there to protect you. Those gloves are to protect my hands. I'll never forget, like I said, when I had my pro fight and I got hit in the face, I felt those knuckles on my forehead. I felt them on my face. And I was like, wow, I thought these gloves are supposed to protect you. No, I realized quick. They're there to protect the athlete's hands. So that's where the banding comes in. Prior to that, the taping, and then the gloves for extra reinforcement to protect the fighter's hands, not to protect his opponent. So we regulate that. And I say that because on occasion, there are trainers that try to get slick. And throughout the history of boxing, you know, the first fight I ever went to as a kid, I was about 16 years old, Roberto Duran against Davey Moore, Madison Square Garden, where he won the title, junior middleweight title. There was a fighter on that card, Louis Resto, who fought Billy Collins. Billy was an Irish kid, 20 years old, undefeated, up and coming. Fought Louis Resto, a journeyman. Panama Lewis was Louis Resto's trainer that night. Somewhere in the bathroom, somewhere where there wasn't an inspector on site, they went to the bathroom, they cut the inside of the gloves, and they removed the horsehair. So Louis Resto was beating on Billy Collins for 10 rounds. And at the end of the fight, Billy Collins' face was like he was like the Elephant Man. He, from that point on, for the rest of his life, he could never box again. He had double vision, got depressed, he was drinking, eventually drove off a cliff, curb, and died. You know, it drove him to a deep depression. Louis Resto was barred for the rest of his life. I think he did some time for that. Panama Lewis was barred for the rest of the sport. He did other cheating with Aaron Davis against Alexis Arguello and the magic drink. We don't know what he gave him to drink.
Yeah, I remember that.
Right. So that's why we have commissioners and inspectors there to make sure they don't cheat. I've been on site where trainers bring prepackaged banding, where they have a substance that once it gets wet, it's going to turn into a cast. And you have to be cognizant of this. And, you know, I've just confiscated. You don't want the athlete, the boxer, to suffer the consequences of his trainer's actions. But you have to be here to watch the shortcuts, how they tie the gloves. They don't tie the knot on the bottom where I'm going to scratch your face throughout the course of 10 rounds, right? Things like that. How skin the gloves back so that when you hit, it's going to cut a fighter. Making sure that they're laced up right, that we're watching out for the safety of both athletes. That's the bottom line. We want to watch out for every athlete, and that's our job.
Yeah, there's a good video out there. If you go onto YouTube and you could or Google Ernie Morales, or go into YouTube and look for Ernie Morales video. You know, your 3Ds, your determination, dedication, discipline comes up as a thing, but it's an NYPD video. I wasn't able to do it, Ernie, because there's music in there, and we get copyright hits from YouTube for the videos. And I got in trouble for playing the Heroes video on the last couple on our show last week. Yeah. And then
Ron's a repeat offender.
So I'm a repeat offender. So we couldn't take another hit, but I enjoyed the video. I told you about it yesterday. It was a 6.5 minute video, but it talks about you know, you're growing up, coming onto the job and boxing, and it actually shows you as a commissioner in that video, and some of the things you're doing. You know, like exactly what you're describing. You know, in the locker room, checking the gloves, up in between every round, you're up on the ring in the corner, making sure that everything's above board. So yeah, I just thought that it'd be interesting for people to hear exactly what you're doing to maintain the integrity and the safety for those you know, in the sport. My wife doesn't like to call it a sport. She's very against boxing, thinks it's too brutal. But you know,
Now, ironically, I had to give up that sport that I love so much because when I was in Mount Vernon, when you sign up for the pension, I said no pension. I was still on the payroll, NYPD, still running my time. No pension, right? Somehow, some less than incompetent individual in City Hall enrolled me in the New York State pension. They linked this on to the New York State Athletic Commission, where I was already on for about 14 years, not in their pension system. Someone enrolled me in their pension system. It kicked in. So when I eventually retired from the NYPD, I didn't want a problem having two pensions. So I had to step down and resign my position so that I could get my money out of the Mount Vernon. The pension contributions I was making into their pension, I needed that money back. The only way I could do that was by resigning from the New York State Athletic Commission. How ironic is that? I had to give up 2 careers for 1 job.
Because some knucklehead thinks that everybody wants a pension and just checked off and put you in for the pension.
Ignoring that I said I do not want any pension. And I will call up and I will argue with them. No, I'm not entitled to a pension. I'm still on the payroll. Like, what are you doing? They didn't listen. Politics.
All right. So listen, we're 2 hours and 6 minutes in. It goes quick, right?
That's right.
So let's everybody, as Terry and Renee always say, let's hit the like, share, and subscribe button. For those of you who don't subscribe, hit the subscribe button. Hit that like button. Let's get the algorithm going. We have about close to 300 people watching live now on all the different platforms. We recommend that you switch over to the Finest Unfiltered, New York's Finest Unfiltered on YouTube, so you can get involved. Chat with Ernie in the chat. We'll bring it up as we come along. And we have a lot of people watching on X. So, if you're listening, that's great. We appreciate it. But, switch over if you can over to the YouTube channel. It works out better. And you could see what everybody else is saying in the chat. Whereas if you're on X, you can only see what I bring up. And especially during interviews, I don't bring up all the chat that's going on with what's going on. So we're 2 hours, 8 minutes in. Like I said, let's move on. We're kind of like bouncing around. So we got you running in now. We got you military over with, or not over with, because I do want to hear about your assignments that you can talk about. And then also now we've talked about your personal boxing and the New York State Athletic Commission position that you had. So let's move on. After a little bit of time off after Mount Vernon, you interview for a position up in Minnesota. Nice,
yeah.
About the same climate as we have right now here, right? 90 degrees every day, right?
About yeah.
and you get appointed as the chief of the
ninth chief of the Metro Transit Police Department, reporting to the Met Council, which answers to the governor in the state of Minnesota. So we were responsible for 90% of the transportation in the state of Minnesota. That was 8 counties, over 3,100 square miles of territory. Great opportunity. Here's what I will say about transit, not only the Metro Transit Police Department, but NYPD as well. It seems like, you have a bottomless budget. You have a budget, but whatever you need to make sure that our commuters are safe is provided for you. And that's one thing I can say about the NYPD and Metro Transit. When you need it, they provide it to make sure that those commuters are safe. So, my career started there. I was a headhunter had reached out to me, gave me a call. I was well into my retirement. And he asks me, hey, did you apply for the Minneapolis Police Department chief job? Said, I don't think so. I don't recall. I don't believe so. And he goes, are you sure? And I go, I'm pretty sure. He goes, no, you did. You didn't get a response. And that was it. Okay, that's fine. I go, well, why are you calling? He goes, well, we have a great opportunity, a better opportunity for you. This is how he worded it. We have a better opportunity for you. And, we think that you should come down to Minnesota, interview for this position, Metro Transit Police Chief. And I said, I'm not interested. And I said it, I guess I said it in Spanish. I said no in Spanish. He didn't understand. I hung up. He calls me back 2 days later. He asks me to please reconsider it, to at least come down to Minnesota. I had never been to Minnesota. I had a conversation with my wife. Said, what the hell? Going to the interview can't hurt. So I went to St. Paul, Minnesota. That's where the interviews were held. We went through a exercise. I forget what it's called right now, but it was a 3-day exercise. And they put you in live scenarios. So like you're meeting with the community, you're doing work where one of these is like a bubble, but you're doing emails, you're answering emails throughout the day, and you're getting in problems as they're coming live, right? So you're actual chief. And as you're answering these emails, you're getting these real live scenarios, and you have to put out the fires, but still go out throughout your days. They want to see how you're handling pressure. There were 3 candidates with us. One of them was the internal candidate who was acting as the interim chief at the time. And you have to work with each other, right? So now the 3 of you that are competing for the same job are now involved in the exercise with each other. And you have to work with each other to see how you manage that situation. And I had learned, because I had gone through this with the same recruiting agency, maybe several years prior to that, and I did miserable. And it was the recruiter told me how miserable I did and gave me pointers. And so during this exercise, I had learned from that first experience. So there was one arrogant guy, and you have to remember that you're being rated by evaluators. They're watching your interaction. So they want to see what your leadership style is. So there was one of the individuals who kept attacking the interim chief. Every point he would come up, he would attack him aggressively, and I would just watch him. I would watch him go back and forth, and then after he would serve him, then I would serve the aggressive guy, and I would come up with a scenario how I'll pull the team together. So it worked. Then I had to write a proposal, a 5-year proposal for the department. I did that. Eventually, that was round 1. They sent me back home. They said they would reach out within 2 or 3 weeks. 2 or 3 weeks turned into 2 or 3 months. I was then invited back to Minnesota. This time I was invited to Minneapolis, Minnesota, because that's where the other headquarters was. And they told me to bring my wife with me this time. So I knew it was serious when they asked me to bring my wife. So they invited my wife.
Who the boss is?
Yes, exactly. So I went through another round of interviews with higher personnel. I met with the council the first time. This time I met with the primary bosses for Metro Transit, as well as the council president, Met Council president. We went through interviews. At the end, I was told they would get back to me in 3 weeks, and I said no. I was told they would get back to me by the end of the day, and I had other offers on the table. I had other offer in Norfolk, Virginia, as the chief of police there, on the table. So I had 2 offers, and I go, hey, listen, I'm telling you now, if I don't hear from you by 4 p.m., I'm walking. Sure enough, and I was given the tour of the city. They're taking me out, giving me a tour of the city. At 3:59 p.m., I get told, come back. HR is sitting there, and they have an offer. They make an offer. I read through the offer. I call my wife. I tell her, hey, this is the offer on the table. What do you think? Like, I'm trying to pressure my wife, right? And I share this because this is the lack of experience that I have. Because I should have listened to mentors throughout the years that told me when you get these positions, even when I got Mount Vernon, when I got this position, other positions as well that was offered. And you know what they all said? Ernie, congratulations, you got the position. Now smile, sit there, and do nothing.
Oof.
Every one of them, and I never listened to that. And I've always had problems and issues because I wanted to bring my NYPD attitude, my Navy experience into these jobs, and that doesn't work. Smile and understand that you're going into a political cesspool. and you have to make people happy. And the only way you last is by going along and getting along. Now, that could put a lot of stress on people. It certainly did on me, because while my wife made the initial move with me, I sent her back 3 weeks later, sent her back home. I came home, I'm working 14, 15 hours, getting acclimated. I'm being fed by a fire hose, getting familiar with everything. And I came home one day and she was in bed. That's not my wife. My wife's active. She's like the Energizer Bunny. Bang, 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 bang. I saw her in bed. She obviously was slipping in depression. And I made the conscious choice of, you have to go home. She looks at me. She gives me that look like, you asking me for a divorce? And I go, no, we're fine. However, her parents were elderly at the time and they weren't doing well. And I thought about this while I was in the office. And I said, if her parents passed away and she was in Minnesota with me, she would hate me for the rest of her life. So it was worth sending her home to spend the last couple of months or years with her parents while I did this job. At the end of the day, they were going to come after me. You have to understand that the higher you go in these positions, the bigger of a target you become. And people try to get to you in any way they can. Well, you only focus on me. You don't focus on my family, because I don't have family there. And that was great. I did come home for Christmas. I got to tell you, my in-laws were actually doing much better than I anticipated. I thought they had 6 months left. She brought life back to them. And they lasted for a couple of more years, but they unfortunately passed away 8 months apart from each other. So it was great that, and I'll get into what I did in the Metro Transit Police Department, right? But this was our promotion, our recruiting promotion. This was their idea. They put me on trains. They put me on buses. They put me on billboards throughout the state. They made a big deal out of it. And here's what I'm going to say. It was never brought up, but you know why I got all this attention? You go out to Minnesota, the Midwest, they're Ecuadorian immigrants now, but there are no Hispanic people. You're either white or black. White or black. So when I would look at the charts, demographics, crime numbers, you either see white, black. You wouldn't see Hispanics, Asians. You see white, black, Asians. No Hispanics. So you know what? Let's rock with the Hispanic boss. Let's throw them out there. Look what Minnesota's promoting. I was their poster child. Okay, I'll rock with it. I love the attention, right? But to my detriment, I love the attention, and I'll say that clearly. It was a great run. We did great things. The officers were responding. When I first went out there with my wife, we went out as civilians, as I always do, approaching cops. I saw them. I liked the way they were dressed sharply. I said, let's go. They gave us directions, but early on, I realized that we went to a stop in Minneapolis. The last stop before you go on is split between the green line and the blue line. It splits in two directions. There were 6 cops on that train, and they all got off at US Bank, where the Vikings play. All of them exited at that one stop. I go, what the hell's going on here? Well, we found out what went on, because the next stop was Cedar, and then we went on to Lake Street. We eventually got to Lake Street. Oh my God. It was ground zero, organized crime, open air drug market, prostitution taking place on the platforms. And my wife looked at me and she goes, this is where you start. So we had to implement a long-term plan. I came up with that 5-year plan. Like I said, we hired outside security because we didn't have enough officers, but the officers were answering their calls from the cars. So they weren't on the train system at all. They weren't in the buses. They weren't in the trains. They would get a call, take their report, go back to the cars. So I had to come up with, we have to be proactive, right? You need that omnipresence. You need the officers to actually be on the system. The only way I can encourage them to do this is leading from the front. So I led from the front. I put on my uniform. I would go out there by myself. I don't need a driver. The gift of gab is what helps you along. And not only did I do this, I took it one step further. I would do it without a firearm. Without a firearm, I go, we can't use our firearm, right? Life decisions. Listen, there's cameras that record you on the system. Not only record you, they pick up your audio as well. So, that's just what I would do. I would go out there and I wanted to be proactive. I wanted to be a role model for them. I would share stories. I had a great year and a half there. I'm not going to say that it wasn't tumultuous. It was. Eventually the interim chief who I beat out for the job, he stayed on the job, and I had to move him because he was constantly undermining me. And we're in meetings. I'm saying what I wanted for the department, direction I want the department in, and this guy is saying we should do it this way. Well, here's the problem. He's been in the department for 30 years. All those underlings are listening to him, right? And I'm going, no, I got to remove this guy. I got to remove him. I removed him. Throughout 18 months there are things that are said. We know there are things that are said to other executives that you believe you're having private conversations. And, I should learn, but I own it. You say things, they take a compilation of words and statements, and they put them together. They make complaints. It's different there, the way they investigate things. They don't investigate things there internally. They investigate them externally. If you read through those complaints, you'll see what they are. They're words. And, unfortunately, this wasn't accepted in over there, and that's cool. I was willing to go through my hearings, except that when I'm home, and I remember I'm by myself, and I'll never forget this. Friday night, I'm home because I was placed on paid administrative leave, so I had to stay at home during the hours of work. So I'm home as a prisoner, waiting because I wanted to go running. That's my stress reliever, right? I can't go running. So I'm home alone. And the night news comes on. And who's the story? I'm the story. Somehow an internal investigation got leaked to the press, and I'm the story. And wow, I'm there by myself. And now I understand how officers go in a dark place. When you have no one to talk to, you have no one to bounce off of. I couldn't even call anyone in the department. They were told not to be in contact with me. And that was a horrible experience. I lost my brother in the process who had overdosed during my tenure there. It was a lot of sacrifice, but well worth the opportunity. Knowing what I know now, if I can repeat the whole process again, I would definitely accept the opportunity. It was great organization. I would just follow my mentor's advice and, hey, enjoy that position, smile, and do nothing. We're going to fix it. We'll take care of that. Just go along to get along, because you were dealing with politicians from every organization, other cities. I had cut off funding for other cities. And you know how people get about their money. I would have conversations with the governor's office on a weekly basis, and they would go through my plans and say, no, we want to pay this department money. Who are robbing us? Robbing us blind. But that's the bureaucracy, right? They're taking money from you. And I go, how do you not see they're robbing us blind? I ask for an invoice and I don't get the invoice. And then when I get the invoice, I realize what they're doing. They're paying their officers overtime within their cities. And then they're on the way back home, they're stopping off in transit. They're picking off a body to say, this is what justifies overtime. But a low quality arrest, number one. These violence interrupters, they were paying, they were giving money. I would look at the videos of these violence interrupters in the trains smoking with the gangsters and the drug dealers. And I would get, why are we paying them? Cut them off. No, you can't do that. We have to get along, go along to get along. If something goes bad, we want them to stand at the podium with us, supporting us and not talking against us. You see everything that's going on in Minnesota right now. And these violent interruption programs being investigated by the state now for fraud. Everything I said. But when you start cutting people's money off, when you start holding people accountable, and you aren't liked as an outsider, you're going to get challenged. And things are going to get used against you. And that's okay. I learned my lesson. I'm not going to say that I didn't say those statements. I absolutely said those statements. Some of them were fabricated, right? But I made those statements. And, shame on me. Shame on me for not being more responsible and feeling comfortable with them. However, great department, great officers. I was really happy there. I would have liked to have seen where it could have possibly went, but it was a very, very difficult duty and responsibility only because I didn't have the support of my family. I was commuting, so I was dating my wife. So these are the things that got me in trouble. Out of uniform, no firearm, no body camera. Me saying I'm a single married man. What did that mean? I'm now dating my wife of 38 years. She's not here. We're commuting. Every 2 weeks, I'll go home. Every 2 weeks, she'll come to Minneapolis. That's where we lived at the time. Minneapolis, right? So she'll come to Minneapolis, and I lived right across the street from Target Stadium, where the Twins play, Minnesota Twins. So, you know, we were commuting and seeing each other, but that was quite challenging. But we were dating each other. So that's what I said. I'm a single married man. And it was great dating my wife. Because as we know, being in long-term relationships, you take each other for granted, you know, routines. So I really enjoyed that aspect of seeing my wife in a whole new light while we were dating. And that was the highlight of a single married man. They turned those words around. That was, you know, for them, it meant like, when I'm here, I'm single, I'm Romeo, I'm available. Get the hell out of here. I knew that that's what they wanted. And you look at those complaints, not one of those complaints will ever say that I was in a room with someone alone or something like that.
Hey, did you have a contract with them? Were you on a contract?
It's a great question, Rob, because that was the one thing I asked for. I asked for a contract. They were against the contract. That came up even in the investigation that I was upset. So when I would share my stories and from my subordinates, there was when I was in Perth, ironically, when I went to Perth, a recruiter had put me down for Austin Police Department. Texas law states that when you apply for a position, your name is posted. That came out while I was in Perth. I said, oh my God, I have to notify my boss. I can't have them reading this in the headline and knowing there's a problem, right? It's going to cause problems. Sure enough, it did cause problems. When I got back from Perth, Senior Management Institute, my police officers asked me in a roll call, hey, sir, Chief, we hear that, you know, you may be leaving us. And I go, hey, all I'm letting you know is a headhunter reached out to me, had my resume, asked me if I'd be interested in looking at other possibilities. I said I was interested. I do not want to leave. However, I do not have a contract here. And if I don't have a contract, I have no protection. So if I have no protection, I have to be looking elsewhere. And when I talk about protection, what I would advise anyone who goes to these positions, first, make sure you have a pension. Thank God we have a pension that we can fall back on, right? Because you lose your job, now you're out. Number two, get yourself personal liability insurance. Personal liability insurance, so if anyone wants to sue you, they want to make complaints against you, you can defend yourself, not out of your own pocket, right? These are things that I definitely want other people to learn from so that you protect yourself out there. And most importantly, the last thing that I always ignored was, hey, when you get these jobs, congratulations. Now go smile and do nothing. Go along to get along. That's the reality of it.
Now, who's there now? Did that interim chief eventually become the chief?
No, the interim chief in Comstat was, I had transferred them to St. Paul Police Department. We had Green Line where we had problems. And their Comstat wasn't Comstat. It was like, oh, look at this. Come on. Just to say they're doing it. It was not Comstat at all. So when we have Comstat, I made it like Comstat. I'm going to hold you accountable. And I looked at some stops in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I said, we have crimes taking place here. What's going on? Why aren't you deploying personnel there? And he stated, I try, but they don't listen to me. You hear that? Imagine an executive saying that in Comstat. Right. You know exactly what's going to happen. Yeah. And I said, are you kidding me? You're a captain in the Metro Police Department. This is a paramilitary organization. They don't want to do it. They have to do it because you're telling them to do it. Do you understand me? Are you not an executive or not? Just like that. Well, he claimed PTSD, trauma. I berated him in front of his subordinates.
Oh, my God.
He never came back to work. Never came back to work. He went out on medical, eventually retired. And, yeah. So, you know, I called him a coward. Absolutely. And that's what they said too. Oh, you use things like coward. Well, he is a coward. I'll say it to his face as well. He is a coward. How dare you leave 30 years in enforcement? You're the interim chief and you step away from the department because you can't handle the pressure. But that's what I mean. You can't hold people accountable when you go to these other departments. You just have to go along to get along, understanding that there's a deep rooted relationship there. They all know each other. You're from the outside. So to your answer, the Thames chief is now an internal candidate who was great. He was the captain there. Great admin guy, sharp, put it together. He's a good chief. He has the right attitude, right temperament for the department. I think that was a great transition. I think I came in there, I fixed the hose, I put out the fire. We reduced crime steadily every time. We solved issues. He's running with it. He's doing a great job, and we don't stay in contact with each other. I'm not in contact with them. I'm one of these guys that move forward. I don't look back. So I wish them the best. I'm happy for the opportunity, but they're doing well.
He's going along to get along?
Oh, yeah, that's him. He's going along to get along for sure. But he's doing it well. He's always done it well. And I respect him for that.
Doing it well. All right. So we got into how that unfortunately ended. His struggles. And listen, I don't think Rob or I or you, and that's why you're sitting where you're sitting now. We can't go along to get along. It's not in us. It's not in our DNA. It's not how we were brought up. It's not how we were taught. It's not how we presented ourselves as executives. It's not how we were treated as executives. And we weren't always treated well, like you said earlier. And it's not always fair, and it is what it is. Rob and I have talked about it in the past, how we've been passed over and we've been told outright because of relationships we've had with the bosses that, what we were told why we were passed over, because we weren't what they were looking for. We weren't the flavor or the ethnicity that they were looking for at the time. I was specifically told this chief, this inspector, and this inspector have to get promoted before you. And I was told that by the chief of department, and every one of those chiefs did not look like me, those inspectors. And it is what it is, but we still went to work every day. We gave it 110% because we were doing it for the right reasons. We were doing it for the betterment of the department, for the betterment of the city, and to ensure the proper treatment of the men and women that worked for us. So, that go along. We talk about it. We talk about the politics of appointment. Marlon Bethel talks about, from the finest Unfiltered, how, and I think Eric is in agreement with him. I'm not sure where John sits on it, where they feel that, an elected sheriff would probably be a better choice than an appointed police commissioner. And I don't agree with that at all, to be honest with you. In the city of New York, it is, listen, it's the police commissioner's job to, just like it's the XO's job and everybody else's job to accomplish the goal of the CO, right? The CO is in charge of the command. They have the mission of and the vision of what needs to get done in that command to get things done. Same thing with the mayor, but I mean, we're dealing with this lunacy of this socialist mayor that we have now. And we see, how that's working out. You have Jessica Tisch, who's pushing back somewhat, but she's still a political appointee. So she has got to go along to get along to a point. We just see that they did the show today, how the city budget was approved, and it was approved without the increase of the 500 officers, which is it's horrible. For the city of New York, because we're taxing our offices so much to do so much, and the summer's just starting. And this is an extraordinary summer with, this weekend we have, the 250th anniversary. You have the huge sale of all the ships. You have Taylor Swift getting married, right? That's a drain on it. You know the protests are going to start up again. You have FIFA, the World Cup, all these demands on the officers, and you're not even putting more people in the academy. Even though we know that putting 500 cops in the academy does really nothing for the men and women on the street for a year and a half. 6 months in the academy, then they have to do time in field training, and it takes time to progress to actually see an effect of these hires. But they're not even doing that because they have this whole defund the police mentality, and even when they're not saying defund the police anymore because it's not popular, they're doing it in other ways, like cutting the budgets. And then it's ridiculous because they're cutting the budget to hire these cops, but then we're going to crush the budget in overtime.
Right.
So it's obviously it's a political appointment. Any chief position, that's not a. But even if you like, you have some sheriffs in Florida and everything that will stand up and will say, "This is how it is. This is law and order. This is Florida. This is what we're going to do." Come in the house, you're going to get shot. Attack my officer, you're going to the hospital. Why did we only shoot 92 times? We ran out of bullets. You're not going to see that here. And a lot of politically appointed sheriffs, you don't see that also because I don't understand what difference you think you might get from a political appointee, someone who's voted in a city like New York who just voted in, Mayor Mondami. So what's your view on that?
First and foremost, politics. Politics has consequences. And for every individual who's watching who states that my one vote doesn't matter, it absolutely matters. Because what you have to remember is it's not the people that aren't showing up, that are showing up to the primaries or the general elections that are making the difference. It's the people that aren't showing up that's making the difference. So every time we get a kook in office and you go, what the hell is happening? It's not because that's what the people want. It's because we aren't showing up. Half the job is to show up and do what's civically responsible for us to do. And if you look at the statistics, you'll realize that these people aren't popular. They're just getting voted out because the kooks, especially the new inbreed in New York City, they aren't native New Yorkers. This is a young crowd, and they're inexperienced in life. They don't understand the struggles of the working people. And they're going to vote for politicians that are going to tell them exactly what they want to hear. I haven't seen one politician who's delivered on their promises yet, because when they get into office, they realize the real challenges that exist to keep a city or a state or a country moving. So it's unfortunate, but when you talk about law enforcement professionals throughout this country, listen, like I said, we're an apolitical organization. We're civil servants who want to come and do a job for the people that we have to do. We expect the challenges from the outside, but we get torn up and eaten internally. And when you get politicians to pile on top of that and to demonize a profession, you wonder why we're struggling with recruitment and policing. What young individual wants to be in a profession that they're going to get ridiculed, assaulted, and even sometimes, you have pranks. Now everything's public. They can look up your address. They can SWAT you, right?
Okay.
Who wants to go through that? Who wants to be harassed unnecessarily 24 hours a day? There's no amount of money for that, right? The headlines, the embarrassment that your family suffers through. We take it as our responsibility, but our families shouldn't have to pay for this. And that old code, and I would say this is the old mafia code, right? The old code of you never mess with women, you never mess with children, then you let family alone, right? That respect has gone out the window, even with social media. And I would love to see politicians say, let's have respect for one another. Let's get back to the center where we support each other. We look out for each other, because that's what community is all about. Not making promises where the media just wants to hit on headlines and they want to sell negative stories all day long. I want to see feel good stories. That's what I want to see. Tell me good things so that our children could grow up watching positive stories and wanting to make a positive impact in society.
Yeah, I mean, a big problem is too is the internal mechanism within a department doesn't support the police officers. So when you talk about the 50A, they should be fighting, whether it's the union, the upper echelons of the department, all the things that the media and social media people can put out there, how they can look you up, find out where you live, dox you, they can swat you, like you mentioned. All of those external factors that are not protected by the internal people in the department causes for the big dismay, because we've always had problem with certain groups and stuff, and I think you've dealt with it, you can understand it, but then now, like you said, when it starts affecting you internally, your family and everybody else, why would you want to be a police officer when you're putting everybody at risk, your whole family at risk? So I just think the department needs to do more. And to your point, the department, when a mayor or a political, if he appoints somebody or she appoints somebody to that position, let that individual do the work that you want them to do and bring forth the promises that chief made to you. Like in your position, I'm going to fix these things. Let me do my job, but don't have your hands in it and tell you to sit down and don't do anything. We don't need that. We don't want that fixed. We want this fixed. No, if I see problems, I need to be able to fix that. And I think that's something that we have spoke a few times on the executive perspective is that, hey, I'll take the job, but you got to let me do what I have to do. Like, give me the problem, and then I'll tell you when it's fixed. But don't tell me, oh, you can't do that and you can't do this. No, don't limit what I have. So yeah, I mean, the problem really extends internally, and you really need people with I would say balls to say, hey, screw it, I'm going to do it, and I'm not going to do it. And I call it like institutional integrity. Hey, if you're going to tell me I'm not doing nothing, go screw yourself. I'm out of this job, and that's what you need. And unfortunately, like you see this political appointments, and they just want to keep their position. They don't care about the rank and file. They just want to be in that position, and they'll do whatever they have to do. They'll provide some pushback, but in some aspects, like I would say, like with Jessica Tisch, who I've seen her push back on the strategic response groups and all of that stuff, and kudos to her. But on this current budget, she should be up in arms. There should be displays of, hey, there's no way I can do this. I can't hire 500 cops. That's my attrition in a couple of months. So what am I going to do? So I totally agree with you, Ernie. I think, and I give you kudos for standing up for yourself and not taking the crap, and doing what you have to do. So, but yeah, to the men and women that are out there now doing the job, you got to stay strong, or you got to find a department that's going to support you. And that's a hard decision too in a lot of places. So
Yeah, and also when you're the boss, a lot of people come at you, like you said, Ernie. You came in with the NYPD mentality. You want to come in, you want to make positive changes, which is what got you the job, right? Your attitude, your experience with the NYPD, with the military, your idea, your 5-year plan. Your 5-year plan wasn't go along to get along. You had to present all these things to become the #1 candidate. Then you get in there and, you ruffle feathers and, you piss people off and everything else. And I'll say a quote I've said several times that was said to me by the chief that was in charge of the Department of Advocate's office. He said, Ron, I don't know when the EEO complaints, right, and the ability to make them became the sword instead of the shield that they were put in place to protect people for, that these cops come and use them as a sword against executives and other bosses by making complaints that are frivolous because they know they're going to be looked at and it's going to hurt the careers of these executives because they're going to hang over their heads. And if they get a bunch of them, they're going to say, oh, where there's smoke, there's fire, even though none of them, become founded. So on that positive note, Rob, Tommy Joyce gave you a spot
I know.
on, my friend.
I thanked them. I thanked them. But earlier in the chat, Tommy Joyce mentioned that they said, Rob, no cash with alligator arms because of the bill last night at the 10-4 Tavern. So I don't understand that. So, but I guess the spot on could make up for it. So, but yeah.
And then, of course, our thoughts and prayers are all with Moxie, who's Tommy Joyce's one of his golden retrievers that has seen on. We've seen with Maisie on the social media, who's not doing well, and is he's been Tommy's been doing the most he could do. Been in and out of the vet, getting the best treatment for Moxie, because people know these dogs are your family members also, and so thoughts and prayers with you, Tommy, the family, and with Moxie and Maisie. So we got that, and then all right. So the one thing we always ask our guests, Ernie, before we'll give you your final word, and we got some housekeeping, and we'll let you jump back in the studio. Just hang out in the studio. We'll talk for a couple minutes after. But we always ask our guests, and then I'll throw it to Rob, and then we'll give you as the guest the last word. Ernie Morales, go back to 1990 with everything that you know and everything that you've been through. Does Ernie Morales, as a young man who just completed his first professional boxing match, take the job in the NYPD and do it all again?
100%, absolutely, yes.
Part two, Ernie Morales. You're a 20-year-old, 21-year-old, 22-year-old man who just finished your first professional boxing match. Do you, knowing everything you know in today's NYPD, take the job now?
Absolutely not. I don't even want my children to get this job. And I was always on them, pressuring them to follow suit because of what it did for our financial wealth and everything like that. But today, in today's environment, I don't want anyone in my family to be a New York City police officer. They are sacrificial lambs. They're suffering unnecessary consequences.
Yeah. And unfortunately, Rob and I both said the same thing on our interviews with John and Eric. Tommy Joyce, I believe, was the first person to say yes on both ends. And there's been one, maybe two other people who have said yes on both ends again. But for the vast majority, we've all said that we would go through our career again back in 1993 for myself, 90 for you. I believe it was 88 for you, Rob?
87, yep.
87. We all said we would definitely do it again, but not going into today's policing. And it's a sad state, knowing how much we love the profession. We love what we did. And, it hurts me to say it. It hurts me to say it. So, Rob, I'll toss it to you before we give Ernie the last word.
Yeah, Ernie, just want to thank you for tonight. I mean, I really appreciate you coming on and giving us your story. I mean, a very impressive story, especially at your command level, the captain, deputy inspector, and then on to the first deputy commissioner, and then the chief. I mean, really, honored to have you on, honored to speak to you. And thank you for sharing your insight, right, for the many that might, look to move on from the NYPD or another department, and giving your insight on how to react and what to look for, when they take that position, because often you don't know, right? You just think, oh, I'm going to take this job and, I didn't get this and I didn't get that, but do I really need it? And you emphasize the importance of quite a few things that are necessary before you even take that position. And, congratulations to, you as a grandfather, to you and your wife, and keep running those marathons, brother. You're doing well. All right. But really appreciate you.
Thank you.
And it's true. Just to piggyback on what Rob just said again, listen, when we were in Housing Bronx, Queens, we oversaw over 1,300 uniformed and civilian members, right? Larger than most police departments. So you would think I can go in and I can run a police department, right? But we had the institutional backing of the entire NYPD. And for the most part, the city. That's not quite the same as it is now. But so it's true, and it's good insight to hear from someone who's moved on to have positions in leadership in other departments, smaller departments, that show that, hey, listen, you were a precinct CO, you were in charge of a couple of hundred people, you were, worked in a borough, you oversaw this. We were borough commander, borough executive officer. We oversaw, 1,200 and change uniform and civilian members. It ain't so easy to just jump into a spot and think that, because like you said, it's so much more of a political position that you have to deal with. And listen, we deal with politicians in our positions as precinct commanders, borough commanders, and everything else. But it's completely different when you're it. And that's it. So thank you again, like Rob said, for your insight. We'll toss it to you for your final words. Anything you want to say to the audience. We appreciate the audience as always being here. There's some people in here that we haven't seen before, who obviously came in. And then we got a super chat from Emilio Rodan. You know Emilio?
It's my brother-in-law.
Oh, your brother-in-law. All right. Well, thank Emilio. We appreciate the super chat.
You.
Thank you very much for that super chat. It's much appreciated. And thank you for coming in. Hey, hopefully you come back and you watch future episodes on the show, because we're always looking to build our audience. But again, Ernie, I'm going to toss it to you for your final words, and then we got some little bit of, as Tommy would always say, some housekeeping at the end, and hang out in the studio, and we'll chat for a couple minutes. Well, yours,
thank
brother.
you for this great. No, thank you for this great opportunity to tell my story and to share some insight. As a country, I definitely want to get back to where we all get along, right? There's no division, but that starts on the local level, goes to the state level and federal level as well. So for my individuals out here thinking about a career in law enforcement, understand that we're in challenging times, but we have roller coasters, ups and downs, and eventually we'll get to a place where they need us and we are once again valued and appreciated. Remember that we're an apolitical organization. We serve the members of our community. But most importantly, when you get into these careers, listen, that detective shield is a beautiful shield. I had it, but it's fool's gold. Move up the ranks because it's a boss's job. Give yourself opportunities to be successful. And overall, our overall objective in life is to be happy. So find your happy place, live well, and understand that it's all about friends and family. Be happy, be healthy. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ernie.
Thank you, Ernie. All right, Ernie, hang out for a couple of minutes. You'll still be able to see us. All right. All right, brother. Thank you. Great interview. We appreciate you. All right, Rob. Good conversation as always. And may Jack Greco's giving you a golden spot on, Rob.
Thank you, brother. There you go. Right. Thank you.
There you go. But all right. So just some housekeeping with the network. As always, for those who follow the network, we know our brother Eric Dim, who is recovering from surgery, still banged up and coming back slowly. Hopefully he'll be back in a couple of weeks, back on the show. Marlon Bethel is full-time, co-host with John on the Day Tour. They're doing a great job. Appreciate everything Marlon does to help out with the network behind the scenes and as well as on air. But our well wishes go out to Eric. Anything he needs, we know he knows we're here. So thank you for your thoughts, your prayers for Eric as he heals. Rob, on that?
No, it says, Mayor Jack Greco, 61, says Lieutenant is a photogenic guy. He really is. He's a good looking man, But
I didn't want to put the picture up. I didn't want to put the picture up that he put up on Instagram with his glasses on in the hospital bed. I was gonna put that one up. I said, nah, this is a better picture. and I got the fake executive perspective shirt on.
Yeah, he looks good in our shirt. So, no, I
But I
wish
couldn't
him
get
all
that
the best.
logo. Nobody could make that logo because of the intricacies on the Finest Unfiltered patch. But
You know what you got to do? You got to get a big one and just put it on our back. That's all.
yeah,
So,
yeah. So, but yeah, we appreciate it.
wish him the best, man. Speedy recovery. Get back soon, man.
Yeah. And on a personal note, I mentioned it in the start, and Rob, you know about all of this. It's a really busy, hectic week. It's been an intense couple of weeks. My mother-in-law was having some medical issues and had to go in and have emergency surgery. She was in the hospital for over a week. So I want to wish Tina, aka Grandma, get well. She came home. She's doing well. She's getting stronger. And so thoughts, love, and prayer to Tina, aka Grandma, to get well soon. And then again, busy week. Tomorrow is my daughter Emmy's 3rd birthday. So one of her favorite shows, Paw Patrol. So wishing Emmy a happy 3rd birthday tomorrow. And then that's great. And then continuing the week, we have the 4th of July on Saturday, 250th anniversary of the United States of America. But it's also my daughter Faith's wedding day. So congratulations to my beautiful bunny girl, Faith, and her soon-to-be husband, Ryan, on their upcoming wedding this Saturday, July 4th. It's going to be a hot one. And then, of course, that's their dog, that cutie Kane right there, who's always a part of everything. So congratulations to them, and I'll share a couple of pictures next week from the actual wedding. And then we brought it up and we spoke about it at the beginning of the show. We want to say congratulations to Tommy Joyce and Pete Viselli. Wrapping up last night was the 10-4 Taverns finale, where we entered one more time. Yourself, myself, Mike Marino was able, and Marlon Bethel were able to join Pete and Tommy for a roundtable, lift a few glasses, tell a few stories, reminisce on the great 52 episodes that they had in the 10-4 Tavern. So one last thought from you on their farewell episode, which we of course tell you, it's going to stay up in the Finest Unfiltered archives. Go back and watch that final episode, plus the myriad of other episodes that they had during their 52-week run.
Yeah, I mean, you got to look at it from our perspective. 2 really great guys, Lieutenant Tommy Joyce, Pete Viselli, 2 great guys, brought on some really, really great guests, interesting conversations, great time, great concept. Okay, 10-4, 10-6, standing by right now. So, like I said, I'm looking for their return. So I was just Detective Nolan for 1 second, because I was going to celebrate this weekend. Obviously, you're going to celebrate because of the 4th, and you're going to celebrate because of the wedding, and Emma's birthday. So you have a lot of celebrations. But for some reason now in my head, Detective Nolan has asked you to come down to the Jersey Shore and said that he's going to put lotion on you. And for some reason, this is stuck in my head, and it's just ruined my weekend.
You have that visual?
I have that visual. I'll never forget of it.
Lotion on.
He
didn't say he was going to put it on me, Rob. In all honesty, he didn't say he was going to put it on me. He just said that he had extra lotion for me.
I know.
I he said he was going to put it on.
I envision him putting it on. Listen, if on Saturday after the wedding you go to the Jersey Shore and he does that, I really got to see a photo of that. All right, please.
No, I don't think that's going to happen. So, listen, we really appreciate the 10-4 Tavern. Your Tuesday nights, watching the show, signing in every week. It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure getting to know Pete and Tommy through the show, and also on a personal personal basis. So with that, Marlon and John and Marlon will be back on Friday, 08:05, Friday, and then Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. They'll be back with New York's Finest Retired Unfiltered podcast with the, up-to-date what's going on with the NYPD and what's going on with New York City local and actual federal policy, politics. They get into it pretty good and pretty deep. So final words, Rob?
No, I love what KB said. Pride was last month, but hey, Detective Nolan, that's it. But no, listen, everybody have a safe 4th of July. Be careful out there, right? And enjoy yourselves. If you're working the detail, I know it's going to be hot, so make sure you hydrate. Make sure you find some sort of shelter, whatever, and enjoy. It's supposed to be really spectacular this year. Macy's always does a great job. So, just be careful and enjoy. Enjoy your family if you're home, and enjoy your family, NYPD family, if you're working. Just be careful.
That's right. Yeah. Great point, Rob. You're going to be wearing your vest out there, carrying the gun belt and everything else. It's a great detail, but it's going to be a long detail and a hot one, like you said, Rob. And so make sure you do hydrate. You find that time to hydrate. And to all the bosses out there, make sure you're taking care of your people. Make sure you're giving them the proper breaks, whacking it up, making sure that they're getting time to sit in an air-conditioned spot that you've been sitting in for most of the tour. So let's make sure that they get hydrated and they get cooled off. So watch your backs, keep your head on a swivel, and happy birthday to America. God bless America. God bless everybody in the NYPD and the U.S. military that keep us safe every day. We appreciate it. And then next week we'll be back at 5:05 p.m. on Wednesday. So until then, everybody, we appreciate you, and so stay safe.